Okay. Let me know if you guys can see me. It says the video is unavailable. Is that true? Can you see? Can you see? Can you hear me? You can see and hear me. Okay. Brilliant. The last thing to figure out. So I know that I can, with this fancy piece of software, I can show you. Okay, wait. I can show you my Sibelius. Can everybody see Sibelius? Can you see the Sibelius window? There's an echo in the audio. I think I can fix that. I think if I turn this off, did that fix the echo? Okay, sweet. And you all can see the Sibelius. Is the delay effect gone? Okay. So the last thing, and I'm not sure whether or not this is going to work because Sibelius uses a different output from, well, first things first, can you all hear this? Can any of you hear anything right now, like music? No. That's what I was afraid of. I was trying to use this. Well, I won't get into it. I really did try for like 30 minutes to see if I can figure out. I might do like, I guess I could get this audio to go out through the speaker and back into the microphone, like my really old videos, and that might not be terrible. It might annoy you all, the audio. But in any case, we'll just start with the. We'll wait for 5 minutes, and then we'll start with the Q&A. And then at the very end, we'll see how bearable it is for this to go back to the microphone. I'm trying to use a separate program called I Show You Audio Capture and use audio MIDI setup in order to create a multi-output aggregate. But the problem is I can't do that because of the way Sibelius handles audio. And I looked it up, and I don't think anybody. I'll probably be able to figure it out in the future, but we won't be able to get computer audio for now. In any case, let me go back to. There we go. Cool. Sweet. So, how are all you doing? Where's everybody from? Let me know. I think it's a 433. And tacit sharp minor. That's funny. Voice meter. I'll have to look that up. California, Denmark, Germany, London, UK. It's amazing how diverse everybody is from. Brazil, Germany, Texas, Jersey. Yeah, go ahead and if you do a question now, it'll go up, and then I won't. I might as well. I'll go ahead and copy and paste it into like a notes just so I have it. But I would wait until like 4 p.m. and then I'm just going to sort of go through the questions successively. Is that AC super loud or is that okay? Because it's freezing. I'm trying to warm it up a bit, but I don't want that to be super loud. Pennsylvania, Ukraine. If you're alive, Gowden. Trinidad. Yeah, go ahead and ask it again later, just because I want to make sure that I get to all the questions and I don't miss any of them. How long have you been learning? Yeah, save the questions. I just want to wait because I said it would be at 4 p.m. So I don't want people that are dutifully show up at 4 p.m. I want to make sure that they, I want to make sure they miss out on anything. It's interesting on my end. It doesn't show. It says the video is unavailable. So. It's right now. It's 3:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, just on the upper northern edge of Greenville at Furman University. You set an alarm for the live stream. That's awesome. That's funny. Well, I guess if I'm not using audio, I don't need to use headphones for now, at least. Let me make sure my notifications are turned off. Boop, boop. Still a question. How are you doing? I'm doing very well. As usual, lots of busyness, lots of stuff on the plate. But everything on my plate is really fun and gratifying. It's not like I have a ton of stuff to do that I just don't want to be doing. So, a lot of really interesting classes this semester. Modal counterpoint is something I'm really excited about delving into, and the composition professor here, Dr. Mark Kilstoff, that's one of his specialities is sort of Renaissance, late medieval and early Renaissance choral music, polyphony, and that's something, they offer tonal counterpoint and they offer modal counterpoint, and each one is once every 4 years, and so for this semester it happened to be modal counterpoint, which I was really excited about because it's just something I'm not particularly familiar. Because it's not just sort of like counterpoint using the modes. The way that they thought of the modes, it's not the 7 modes we have today, but they have like Dorian and Hypodorian, and they have things like reciting tones, and the rules, the contrapuntal rules, are much different than they are today. Even things like parallel fifths and fourths and things that we don't like today, they thought those were the purest intervals, and you should end and begin phrases with sort of perfect intervals. And the imperfect consonances, which is where the term imperfect came from, are thirds and sixths, and those were sort of treated like dissonances. So it's a really totally different way of thinking. So I think it'd be really interesting to study. I'm going to buy the score to Rimsky-Korsakov. Sure, how's that? What do you personally think about that piece? Yeah, save that question. Well, we're about starting anyway. So yeah, what kind of questions are we allowed to ask? Pretty much anything. Literally anything is fair game. If I'm not going to answer a question, I'll just tell you, like, I don't want to answer that question, but I'm pretty much anything is fair game. It is impossible to offend me or anything. So anyway, hey everybody, welcome to the stream. Thanks for showing up. It always amazes me how many of you show up. Already 50 and it's 4 p.m. So as I said before, questions are fair game. I tried to get, for those of you just now joining, I tried to get my audio, my computer audio working, and I couldn't quite get that working. I did manage to figure out how to share my screen, and I might be able to, the Sibelius audio to sort of come out my speaker and back into the microphone. So I may try to do some composing at the end, or whatever you all suggest you think you want me to do. But if it's just absolutely unbearable, I'll probably do maybe a separate stream where I compose, where I can, actually sit down for an hour or two and get it all working. And it's hard to test things out because I don't just want to do a bunch of actual live streams. It's sort of like, it's hard to figure out whether or not things are going to work, sort of when things are offline. But in any case, again, thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I really can't believe it. I mean, I just hit 10K recently. It's already up to 10,500. So again, hopefully, it just inspires me to try and make better videos. So anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and might as well get into question and answering. Let me start it from the top. Going to buy the score to Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade. What do you personally think about the piece? Any thought on what it is worth noticing when studying the score? Well, I mean, so there are a couple advantages to studying Rimsky-Korsakov, whether or not it's that particular score, and then there are advantages to that score. The advantage of studying Rimsky-Korsakov's music and familiarizing yourself with it, getting in your ears, getting in your blood, is the fact that in his book, The Principles of Orchestration, that book is not necessarily a text that a lot of colleges or orchestration courses tend to use as a main curriculum because it's not particularly systematized. Basically what Rimsky-Korsakov does is he does go through basic instrumentation, but the real value of it is he explains what he personally does in his own music with references to his works. And even now, it's very difficult to find. There's a collection of MIDI renderings of the excerpts in the book, but they're not particularly good. The best way to get a lot out of that book is to really familiarize yourself with his music, so that when you see the score examples in the book, you immediately can hear it in your head, and you sort of it's just him commenting on what you've gone through the score. So anytime you want to study Rimsky-Korsakov, I think it's always a good idea to sort of correlate into his book, The Principles of Orchestration, because he specifically discusses excerpts from his music all over the place. That particular piece, though, I think is wonderful for a couple of reasons. I don't want to go into this super long, but his balance, Rimsky-Korsakov's balance, is absolutely impeccable. The dynamic markings, and also he's not very fiddly with his dynamic markings. Some composers like Williams and Mahler, Gustav Mahler, are very, very particular with their dynamic markings. They try to micromanage everything. Pianissimo, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte. They try to get everything to work in such a particular way. And Rimsky-Korsakov's dynamics tend to be almost Mozartian in their simplicity. Forte, piano. And he was a little bit against, and he talks about this in some of his literature, using dynamics like mezzo forte or mezzo piano, just sort of like borderline. And so the way that he constructs his textures and the registers that he places his material in, and just the way that it's composed in terms of part writing and harmony is so like clockwork, and it's so perfectly balanced that oftentimes the balance is built into the orchestration. So he can give everybody forte, maybe the brass mezzo forte, but he doesn't have to micromanage the dynamic levels because everybody can play the same dynamic level, and the way that it's written is just impeccably balanced. So I would definitely check out the combinations of instruments that he uses. Where is the melody, and what register of what instruments is it? And he's just a very restrained composer. And another thing that he does very well on Scheherazade is development of thematic material. That's a very long, 50-minute piece that is just constructed from lots of tiny little bits and pieces of motives that he just spins out over and over again. So I think it's a really great piece to see how you can get so much mileage and momentum and interest out of these very simple motives. So those are just two of the reasons why I think that's a great score to study. Did your professor assign Nud Jepson's text in 16th century polyphony and the Palestrina style? No, I think that's probably on demand, but the particular text we're looking at, I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called, because we just started the class. It's A Practical Approach to 16th Century Counterpoint by Robert Galden, and it's I like it so far. It's pretty succinct. It doesn't shy away from talking about the historical backgrounds, but it also is not afraid to get into just the nitty gritty of the theory. And it's not super esoterically written. It's the prose is very elegant and not more complex than it needs to be. But again, I've only had one class so far on it, so I can't give a huge opinion on that text. Do you aim to mostly stick to the old rules like those in your own work? That's a whole topic. When and when not you stick to the rules. I don't like to think of them as rules. What I like to think of is these are things that people did. People wrote in this way, and if a bunch of people wrote this way, there must be a reason why they wrote this way. For example, you usually should double the root, okay, when you're creating vertical voicing, and then figure out why do you usually double the root. Well, it's because the overtone series of the root aligns itself most closely with the chord that you're trying to create. So if you have a C major chord, if you build the overtone series off of the root C, it's basically just, with slight tuning differences, it's basically just spelling out a C major chord. So it's reinforcing the other notes of the chord. If you build it off of G, the fifth, well, yeah, you get some notes, you get a reinforcement of G, but you also get a D and you also get a B, which are not notes that belong to C major, but they're still tertian notes, right? The B is just an upper extension of C, and then the D creates a ninth with the C, so it's not super dissonant. But if you try to take the third and you build the overtone series off the third, you get a G sharp, which is quite dissonant, right? And so it's not necessarily, sometimes I might want to double the third to sort of muddy up the overtones if I want a melancholy sound. These aren't rules. Just, it's interesting to understand, a bunch of people of this particular era did this thing because they had this certain cultural sensibility and their ears were accustomed to a certain type of sonority, a certain concept of consonance and dissonance. And it's like anything, consonance and dissonance is a universal property. It is built into the overtone series. If you have a minor second, the waves oscillate much more frequently than an octave, where you just have, one wavelength is the half of the other wavelength, and there's an actual, and this is a side thing, I might have talked about this in a video, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but there are also interesting things. If you play a minor second, like a B and a C, that's probably not a B and a C for those perfect pitch people, but if you play an interval like that, and you put each interval in your separate ears and completely pan them opposite, you actually don't hear the dissonance. You don't hear the oscillation, because when your brain is taking them in two different ears, you can hear the B and the C, but you don't actually have the physical sensation of the waves vibrating. So anyway, the bottom line is, I don't think you should look at these rules and sort of follow the rules blindly without knowing why the rules were invented, but you should look at why the rules were invented and then say, oh, and then make a more intelligent if-then. You know, if I want a very pure, sonorous chord, I should double the root for this acoustic reason having to do with the Overtone series. It's an if-then statement. If I don't want that type of sonorous sound, there's no reason for me to follow the rule. But if I do want that type of sound, it's good for me to have that knowledge, because that allows me to get the sound that I want immediately, especially if I have to reach a deadline. You know, a lot of these things are just sort of, they're keeping these if-then statements. It's sort of like when you're programming in a weird way. I don't know if any of you have done computer programming, but if you have a function that you use over and over again, you don't want to type in the same function, the full code for the function, so you just have the function stored as a text, and then you can refer to it by use of a function or a variable, right? So if I say, you know, if I type in a piece of code that says add item, you know, sword or something, I don't have to say add item sword and then I have to type in the name of the texture of the sword and the polygons and like everything about the sword. I'm just referring it to a file that exists on the computer. So that's sort of like what it does. I don't have to bog myself down with thinking about all the science and the acoustics and things. I can just sort of say, oh, okay, if I want a sonorous chord, double the root. And then you can, all the rules are sort of like that. So it is important to learn why the rules exist so that you can just intelligently apply the rules when you need to them. It's all just about getting the effect that you want. And what you don't want to do, at least what I don't want to do, is just sort of like try things out. I try this, no, it doesn't sound good. You're sort of blindly trying things out until you happen upon the right thing. When you learn a lot of these rules and a lot of these ways of thinking, it allows you to sort of narrow down your choices initially. It'd be like, I'm going on a rabbit trail here, but it'd be like if you were playing a game of chess, right? Good chess players, it's not necessarily that they immediately know what the best move is all the time. Even a computer will say, okay, maybe these 3 moves are good moves, right? But a chess player doesn't sit down and say, I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that, and just literally calculate every possibility. You would just get completely bogged down. Whereas if you sort of have some general principles of chess, and if you have a plan, if you know what you're trying to accomplish, and you can think a little bit in advance, you can sort of narrow down the choices to maybe 2 or 3 good choices. You still have to make a choice. It's not like the rules just, there's still a creative artistry in it, but it's a much more pointed, focused, intelligent creative artistry as opposed to just fiddling around until you get the right thing. Anyway, hopefully that gave you my opinion. Whoa, so many questions. What kind of music groups were you in high school? I actually did a lot of singing in high school. I don't consider myself even a moderately good singer, as I'm sure you can tell why when I hum my videos. But I did a lot of, I sung Theodore Lawrence III in the play Little Women. Which was like a main role. I was singing high G's and B flats, or trying to. So that was a crazy experience for me, and I was not sort of huge on singing, but I'm really glad that I got into that. I also sung a lot of barbershop quartets, and even now I sing with the Pitch Hitters, which is a men's chorus. I really love singing. It really gets you in tune to voice leading and how, especially if you don't sing the melody but an inner line, it really gives you a sense of you know, what is easy and good not to sing. And if you can write something that's singable, it really makes it satisfying to play on any instrument, because the voice is very, very beautiful, right? But at the same time, it's the most limited in terms, because you have to be able to hear it in your ear before you can produce the tone. You have to hear A, you know, before you can do it. As opposed to a string instrument where you sort of see a G on the page and you put your finger in the right position, and you know, and you play it, and you're gonna be able to fairly reliably produce a G without necessarily preempting it in your ear. So, I've done a lot of singing. I've played in jazz band. I played in some jazz trios. Right now, I'm playing with the Furman Jazz Band and a trio, and I did a lot of, you know, piano playing for parties and stuff. I did have the opportunity to be in an orchestra, actually playing some John Williams recently, which was a lot of fun. That was really fun. He doesn't mess around when it comes to his orchestral piano writing. What was your first instrument? What instruments do you now play or sing? My first instrument was definitely the piano. I've also got quite a bit involved in percussion. I've been in percussion ensemble. I play the drums, and I actually play the double bass, not the double bass, bass drum and percussion ensemble. And that's actually harder than you'd think. It's definitely not as virtuosic in terms of rudiments as like snare and toms, but there's a lot of subdivision. You'll have things like and you have to sit here and be like and so being able feeling subdivisions, that really helped me out with that, and so I'm really glad that I did that. But honestly, I mean, I do sing, and I do have a lot of experience singing and percussion, but I would really only consider myself a pianist. Like, I'm only really good at the piano. Sloven Pierre, cancel mine out for that. That's great. Please post this as a video for those who can't catch it. Yeah, it's going to save, and it'll post to my channel. How can you keep yourself creative, as it were? How can you come up with new material at a decent pace? That's interesting. I think just be very aware of... Creativity is not something you can force. You can't sit down and sort of intellectualize creativity, right? You know, if you have a certain amount of skill, you can certainly come up with things that work, but there's no denying that what you come up with tomorrow, what you come up with today, you know, maybe one of them might be better just because you're sort of feeling it creatively. It doesn't matter how good you are, that people, you know, you have your creative ups and downs. So to me, the biggest way to avoid that is sort of feel when I'm being creative and then really go for it and take advantage of it. So for example, if suddenly I'm listening to a piece of music and I just feel this urge to write some like piece of music and I have all these other projects to work on and I shouldn't write this piece of music, rather than sort of letting that die away, I will stay up until like 4 in the morning and just write it out on paper. I might not even finish the piece of music, but I got something really creative and maybe quality out of that just because I was in the mood, you know, just sort of feeling it. And then I will stow that away on my hard drive. I will organize it, make sure that I have it. And then later on, I have all these different melodies, these pieces unfinished. They're just everywhere because I just sort of like try and immediately write something down when it comes to me. And so then when I go and create something, I'll try and be creative. But if I ever comes to a creative drought, it's always okay because I know I have like 15 love themes sitting on my hard drive, you know, 16 forest themes, a bunch of jazz tunes. You know, if you try and just sort of like let your body just be creative when it is creative and notice that about yourself. Notice, okay, I'm in a creative mood right now. Take advantage of that, create something, and then stick it in the freezer, and then you very well can pull it out. I do, personally, I do that all the time. There are so many projects where, you know, a lot of the project is fresh stuff that I create, and a lot of it is sort of rehashing old material. So, yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit. When working with a new employer you've never worked with, how long does it generally take you to figure out what they want exactly? How many drafts does it take? How much time? That's a good question. It totally depends upon the employer. Sometimes, you know, you'll just immediately hit it off with the director. Sometimes you might have the same musical tastes, or sometimes you just have a really, you know, intuitive way of communicating, and you just totally hit it off, no problems at all. First thing you give them is exactly what they want, right? More often than not, you know, that's not necessarily the case, and I think it's really important for a composer to be extremely humble and to be very, very courteous. It doesn't matter because it's so easy as a composer to think, oh, this director's being a, you know, he's being a, you know, insert word to me, and he doesn't appreciate what I'm doing, and he's asking for all these changes, and I don't just throw. You gotta understand, they don't compose music. They don't know what it's like, right? They just are thinking about their project. This is their baby, and they want what they want. And if you don't give them what they want, they'll find something else. That's the reality of the situation. So, you know, if as a composer, one isn't able to be courteous and to set aside your ego and pride and be extremely professional and be able to have a dialogue, give them what they want. And if you give them something and they don't like it, to immediately be able to diagnose it from a third person, unemotionally attached, and just be like, okay, well, what did they not like about it? And have a dialogue with them. If you can be able to produce that for them and you're very courteous, they will come back to you. It doesn't matter how good of a composer you are. Like Bernard Herrmann, for example. Bernard Herrmann was phenomenal, one of the greatest composers who ever lived, an absolute creative genius. And yet even his relationship with Alfred Hitchcock and a lot of directors were strained, and there was a lot of conflict, and they ended up separating after a while because of the fact that he just was an eccentric and very difficult person to get along with. So I think good social skills and good people skills are important. But another side note, and I might have, again, this is an anecdote that I might have told before, so I apologize if I have, but I was working with I was working with a video game director on I think it was 7 Days to Die, and I was writing some ambient music, and he came to me and he said, oh, okay, I like it, but it sounds too medieval, right? And I couldn't figure out what he meant. I was like, okay, maybe the harmony's too modal. Maybe I should make it a little bit more creepy. It is like a zombie apocalypse game, so I sort of demodalified the harmony, so to speak. It still sounded too medieval. I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't make it as melodic. Maybe I should just make it more, ambient. So I did that. Still, I went through, I think it had 4 or 5 changes. Finally, I took out the clarinet solo. There was a clarinet solo just playing some gentle, sort of like Jeremy Solo-esque stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, that's perfect. And I was and then I asked him about it, and it turns out he thought the clarinet sounded medieval. He wasn't able to articulate that because he wasn't a musician, and he may not have known or been able to recognize the clarinet, or even known himself that the clarinet was. And someone else might look at that and not even think that clarinet. There's something inherently medieval about clarinet, but something about his conception of music made him think that a clarinet was medieval, right? And you may think that, oh well, idiot, or blah blah blah. But again, I don't think that's a good way to think about it. A lot of directors, and interestingly, so it's just a matter of communication and knowing, are they talking about a timbral thing? Are they talking about a harmony thing? Are they talking about a melodic thing? Figuring out what their language is, because it's amazing how many directors will say, this sounds like this, and they mean the melody. And then other director will come along and say, oh no, that sounds like this, even though it's melodically completely differently, but just because they both use trumpets. Some people are more texturally oriented, more melodically oriented. They can't pick apart music into its different constituents like a musician can. So I think developing a relationship with them, communicating with them, figuring out how they communicate about music, which is really why temp tracks have become so popular. I mean, composers complain about temp tracks, and yes, there are negatives to temp tracks, but it is just really difficult for non-composer, non-musician directors to communicate about music. They start talking about major and minor, and it just doesn't work at all. The best way is for them to say, hey, here's this thing that I like, create something like this. And you'd be surprised how much creative freedom you have as long as you figure out what it is about the temp track that they like. Because then you could take that, replicate it, make every other aspect of it different, and you'll be able to give them something that they want. It has what they want out of the temp track, but at the same time, you're exercising your own creativity. You're not just ripping off the temp track. And you might think, oh, well, if I have a director who is a musician, then that's going to be great. And it's not. It's actually a lot worse. At least in my personal, I've had 2 cases where I've had a director who is very musical, and they just want to micromanage absolutely everything. They want to take transitions off, move this, say, you can put this into B section. Oh yeah, you can modulate into B minor. I think a director or a music, editor who is very, very musical and very theoretically knowledgeable. That's all. At least for me, I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to my music. So that's also not the solution. So I would just say, again, look at what exists, look at these conventions, look at the temp track, and don't think of yourself as a frustrated composer. But at the same time, don't sacrifice your artistic integrity. Figure out a way. I truly believe that in almost every case, in every case, I really do think that you can give them something where you don't compromise your artistic integrity, and at the same time, you are being courteous to them, and you are giving them what they want. I think there's a happy medium. Sorry, let me open my window. It's getting hot here. So hopefully that answers that a little bit. At least my own personal subjective experience. Your CR videos opened up all of musics to my students. Oh, that's wonderful to hear that. I wrote a description for 1,200 CRs with estimates. Do you think there's any commercial use for this? Do I think there's any commercial use for this? In terms of like a pedagogical thing, like turning it into a, or do you mean like you? I think she didn't clarify that last sentence, Corey, and I might be able to answer that. How long have you been learning music theory? What's your opinion on Franz Liszt's symphonic poems? How long have I been learning music theory? I've explored theory. It wasn't until like I've explored and sort of analyzed music since I was like 5 years old. Just sort of like basic chord progressions and things and modality. And I started out very modally oriented. To me, it was just like, okay, here are the 7 notes: Aeolian, Locrian, Lydian, Mixolydian. And I didn't really get into the whole tonal system, tonic and dominant, until later. I really started studying theory systematized, like in a lecture environment at Artios Academies when I was about 14 years old. But I had studied books before that. But really the first time that I actually started studying like music theory as an existing framework for thinking was probably about 10 or 11 years old, where I started getting my hands on music theory texts. But the vast majority of my knowledge and my instinct and my framework for thinking about composition, I didn't learn from a book. It literally just came from me exploring music at the piano. What does this sound like? What does that sound like? Why does that sound like? Why does that make me feel the way that I do? And just trying lots of different things and developing a framework, and especially analyzing Zelda music. That was a huge thing. Just the entire Zelda Ocarina of Time soundtrack, listening to a track, figuring out how to play it by ear on the piano, and then figuring out how it worked, and then composing a piece, basically just imitating it and ripping it off. And I think that's a good place to start for any composer. You get beyond imitation, you sort of synthesize, and you can develop more of an original voice. But when you start out, I mean, that's the way how the composers back in the olden times learned, is they just copied out existing music, or they imitated, right? So I don't necessarily think imitation. I think that's how I started, and it was certainly helpful to me. Friends symphonic poems, I've heard some of them, and I quite like Liszt, especially when he has like good some of his good melodic material. Some of the stuff is a little too flashy. I'm not a huge fan of like virtuosic sportsmanship like music. I'm more of a like, sort of like artistic beauty kind of person. But I'm not familiar enough with those pieces to give you a good opinion. I haven't listened to them in a long time. How would you start a composition? What's your workflow like? I know how to develop a motif, an idea that struggle to come up with an original one, which isn't some par. Okay. First, it's like what's my goal, right? So if I'm writing for a game or film, you know what that goal is. I have to create this aesthetic. I'm writing a theme for a character. I'm writing a blah blah blah. Maybe even it's just a chord progression that works for a certain scene, and you want it to emotionally signify. So if you have that, that's okay. If you're writing a classical piece or a piece for an album, or something that doesn't have a perimeter, an external perimeter, and you're creating an internal perimeter, to me, I always just think about it as a method of self-improvement. It's just my own personal way. I sort of think, oh, okay, you know what? Whenever I tend to write, like in my symphony, one of the things that I tried to focus, the second movement of my symphony, one of the things that I was trying to focus on was sort of reconciling the vertical and the horizontal. So I found that a lot of times I write very contrapuntally, but the vertical harmony wasn't necessarily that interesting or emotionally impactful. It's fairly banal, right? But the lines are really nice and the counterpoint's nice. Or I would write very vertical, sort of like juicy harmony, but then the lines were not that interesting, and in fact quite weird. And so one of my goals was like, okay, let me see if I can write a piece of music where the individual lines are very interesting from a linear perspective, but at the same time it makes good vertical harmony. How do I accomplish that? Then I can sort of go sit down at the piano and sort of, how can I sit and that just provides a springboard, So I oddly enough think about a lot of writing a piece of music as just sort of a way, how can I extend. I get very bored when I start writing the same thing over and over again. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I already wrote that, or oh, that sounds like what I wrote, a few weeks ago or a year ago or whatever. I'm always trying to push forward and sort of expand. And there's not necessarily a problem with using, previous techniques that you've learned in a piece of music, but I always want to have like at least, maybe 50% old, 50% new. And so. Yeah, and it just starts with ideas, like, again, a chord progression or a contrapuntal line or a mode. Once you have all the individual pieces, then it's your job to sort of strand them together into a coherent form that is sort of like a narrative. It's like when you're writing a story, you brainstorm the characters, the places, and sometimes you might even think, okay, I've got this character, I've got this character. Wouldn't it be funny if they met at a coffee shop and then this sort of, the waiter slipped and then they, you make up a scenario, and then maybe you have to come up with a story plot idea that justifies why that scenario exists. But the real reason the scenario exists is because you want these characters to interact with each other. That's often how I think. You come up with the individual ideas and strands and maybe even scenarios in which they work, and then you come up with something around it that contextualizes it and justifies it. So, I mean, that's how I personally work. Vaughan Williams' Instrumentation on the theme by Thomas. It's wonderful. It's definitely a beautiful chord. I think just Vaughan Williams' string writing in general is just phenomenal. The way that he uses Debussy, he fills up. He violates, interestingly, a lot of the quote unquote rules or conventions of orchestrations. But his harmony, his modal mixture, mixing between different modes, is beautiful. And his sense of melody is really, really, really gorgeous. I think it's just a combination of modal mixture, the way he orchestrates for strings. and the fact that his melodies are simultaneously repetitious and catchy in a good way, but they're also strange because of the fact that they use so much modal mixture, and so they're very classical in a certain sense, and yet they're also very modern in another sense. So I don't know. I definitely like Vaughan Williams. My personal favorite though is his Sea Symphony. I don't know if any of you have heard that, a Sea Symphony by Vaughan Williams. That has some of the most just the first 5 minutes of that song symphony gives me chills every time I listen to it. It's so epic. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The real test of a gifted composer is how he or she elevates material that is banal. Yeah, I definitely think so. That doesn't mean that your material necessarily has to be banal, but it's definitely a fun test, as you say, to see if you can take something uninteresting and make it. And again, interesting is things don't always necessarily have to be interesting on their own. Sometimes things that are really interesting, once you start developing them, they become less and less interesting the more you develop them because you're breaking them apart. Whereas if you have something simple like da 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 or bum bum ba da dum bum bum, like a fugue subject of Bach, something that is actually that's from Mozart's. That's from a Mozart fugue subject. But if you have a fugue subject or something that is banal, you can take it and develop it into something that can only sort of get better, and it's also so simple and emotionally white, so to speak, pale, colorless, that you can just do nothing but add color to it, right? So there are different ways of thinking about that, but how much downtime in between composing pieces do you really have? 9 to 5 daily, more haphazard. I'm really weird when it comes to my composing. I feel like I waste so much time. I don't know how I get things done, but like when I'm feeling it, I'll sit down and just sort of like, okay, this is it, and I'll write down and I'll write a piece of music and I'll be working on it for like 7 hours just straight, and I'll forget to eat, right? And then other times, just don't force it. You know what I mean? Just don't even if you have a deadline, rather than sitting down and forcing yourself to write a piece of music, say, okay, I've got a deadline I have to worry about. Let me just see if I can forget about that. And then, go for a walk, listen to a piece of music. I mean, listening to music and going for a walk is also a very good thing. And trying to empty your mind. I know it's like, oh, empty your mind. But, like, it really does help. Go out and walk and just see if you can... Like, I like walking around the Furman Lake. There's a lake at Furman, and I enjoy walking around it if I'm sort of creatively stifled. And so... what I'll try to do is not hum anything in my head, right? Because as a composer, your head is constantly filled with music. Other people's music, your music, mixed together, everything. So just sort of like force yourself to get that out and just listen to what's around you. And you just sort of empty the cup, so to speak. And then when you go back, you'd be surprised at how much room there is to be creative when you sort of empty out all of those external influences. Because I feel like that's the big thing that a lot of people run into with writers' block. It's not that they can't write anything, it's that everything they write sounds like something they've written before or something like someone else wrote. They can't do anything new. And the solution to that is to empty your head of all the stuff that you've written and other people have written in a sort of meditative way. Book or online resource that explains, dissects a typical setup for Sinatra, Nelson Riddle type big band accompaniment. A book I would recommend for big band arranging is Arranging for Big Band Ensemble, or I think Arranging for Large Jazz Ensemble is what it's called, and it's Berkeley Press. It's a big orange book that tells you everything you need to know about big band jazz arranging, and just get your hands on some of the classic, like Duke Ellington, and get your hands on some of those classic scores. Music theory is more descriptive than prescriptive. I definitely agree with that, and that's why I like to come at music theory from more of a prescriptive point. All you'll notice, like my CR, anytime I talk about music theory as a composer, it's always prescriptive. Here are ideas for composing music, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of a lot of pedagogical ways of teaching theory and form and analysis. Really frustrated me because it is very, very descriptive and sort of looks at the commonality between music as opposed to what makes things different and interesting and anomalies. Hey, Dylan. It scrolled me down. Kind of suck at composing. I have a lot of writer's block. Should I put composition aside for some years and do a lot of score reading? It depends upon why you have writer's block. If you feel like you don't have enough information and you don't have enough experience, I would definitely do a lot of score reading. Yeah, and I would just start really small. You know what I mean? Like, right? I mean, there's some beautiful little pieces of music that are just super simple, like a waltz for piano or something. You know, just a nice little tune, basic accompaniment. Find two chords that you like. You know, like D minor and G major, like minor 1, major 4, Dorian mode. The simplest like Dorian thing you could do. There's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of when I was younger, I used to just like da 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 da. Just sit down and play with that and really familiarize yourself with that. Then add a new chord to your palette. Okay, D minor, G major, and E minor as a substitute for G major, and just sort of start small and don't feel like you have to start writing a symphony. There is absolutely nothing wrong with just writing short, simple, 16 little bar pieces of music, and don't think, oh, I have to. Just writing it in and of itself will get you experienced and get better. And I can't like diagnose your issue, you know, and unless because sometimes the issue is ear training. People have a lot of stuff in their head, but they can't get it out because they can't recognize intervals or be able to translate rhythms in their head, rhythmic dictation. So there are a lot of possible issues, but I would just try and do a self-diagnosis. You know, why do you have writer's block? You know, like what I said earlier, is it because your head is so much filled with music, or is it because of the fact that you don't know how to get what is in your head out on paper because of facility, or you don't know how to execute it, you know, score reading. So yeah, but I definitely think score reading, I don't think you should totally kill composition, but you should definitely involve score reading. And just don't be so hard on yourself. Just force yourself to write music, and you don't have to even show it to anybody. You know what I mean? Just enjoy the process of writing music. Don't be so focused on the end product that if the end product doesn't turn out what you like, then it's just, you know, that's just gonna get you frustrated, and then you're just gonna, you know, ditch it. You know, just enjoy the process of writing music. You have a schedule for what study, composer, practice, you just go with that. I try to schedule everything out. I try to plan everything out to a T, but I also try to be flexible with myself, and I will constantly shift things around, you know. So to me, it's all relative. I sort of think, okay, this is how many hours in the day there are. I need to do these things. So I'm going to do all these things in the day, but I can shift them around at will. So if I had planned on doing homework, but suddenly I'm feeling creative, I'll swap the composing later in the day and the homework just. So I still am getting the same things done, but I've swapped composing for now because I'm feeling it, right? So me personally, that's kind of how I do it. I plan out in the day, or maybe even in the week. Sort of, I know I need to get these things done, and then I'm pretty good at getting those things done. But everything is sort of like, you know, you can swap anything and everything around depending upon what you feel like, because you're always going to be, even like, just, this is weird, but like cleaning, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll just feel like, you know what, I just feel like taking a break from composing and just doing laundry and just OCD satisfying folding clothes, you know what I mean? And so then okay, I'll do laundry. Laundry needs to be done anyway, so it's not like, you know. So yeah, so just kind of, again, be in tune to your body and acclimate yourself to what it wants to do, as opposed to forcing yourself to doing whatever you plan to do. Do you have a schedule for the dummy? Can you explain what the Overtone Series is Marlene Singer actually is? So yeah, I mean, I would just look up. Leonard Bernstein has a pretty decent video. It's an excerpt of his Harvard Norton lectures. Leonard Bernstein Overtone Series. I don't want to spend a lot of time going into that on here, but basically, the Overtone Series is just an acoustic phenomenon. Whenever you have a consistently constituted vibrating body of sound, which basically just means something that is constructed. Its molecular structure is consistent enough that it is able to create a vibration, like a guitar string, right, or a drum that has you know, an equal circle around, and you hit it and it vibrates and it's able to produce a tone. Not only does it produce its fundamental tone, which is sort of like you know, the tone you hear, but it also produces sympathetic vibrations. So it produces half of the wavelength of the original tone, a third of the wavelength, a fourth of the wavelength, a fifth, sixth, seventh, etc. And some of these are algorithmic, so like a third of the wavelength, for example, is an irrational number, right? Because, you know, like a third of 100 is like 33.3333. You mathematicians will probably get on my bum for using the wrong, technically not irrational, but it goes on forever. It's a fraction instead of a whole number. Anyway, my point is, whenever you play a single note, even if it's by itself, you're always going to get sort of these overtones. And different instruments have different volumes and sort of these different partials, is what they're called in the Overtone series. So like a French horn, some overtones are louder as opposed to like a cello. And it has to do with the fact that like when you play a cello, certain overtones will sort of sympathetically resonate with the body of the instrument. So if you had different wood for the body of cello, it would slightly change the timbre of the sound, because certain frequencies would resonate more and certain frequencies would even cancel each other out. And even like the room that you're in changes the Overtone series. But anyway, so basically the only timbre that exists that doesn't have an overtone series and just has the fundamental. It's a sine wave, right? And then if you just go into like a DAW if you have one and open up an equalizer and just play a saw wave and play a sine wave, you'll see that the sine wave has just one pointed sort of tone, a fundamental, right? And a saw wave has like all kinds of tones and all kinds of overtones. But yeah, I could. It's a huge, giant topic that I could get into, but a lot of people already know about it, so I don't want to get into that. But just yeah, I would just also Vihart has a great series on the Overtone series, so I would definitely check that out. Who are some of your favorite living composers from all across the board? How do you organize your learning with so many potential projects of music? Favorite living composers. Christopher Rouse is a great composer. He has really interesting orchestration and like Phantasma was a great piece of music. I like his stuff. As far as like film composers go, I mean you know the ones that exist. You know, John Williams, Joe Hisaishi, James Newton Howard. Although he hasn't done anything super impressive of late. A lot of video game composers. Jeremy Soule. Definitely Jacob Collier has been someone I've been super fascinated with recently. If I think of any more, I'll you know, not too many living today. Definitely Steve Reich and John Adams. I'm a huge fan of minimalism. How do you organize your learning with so many potential projects in music? I kind of talked about that. How do you feel about accompanying orchestras with synthetic instruments like Bernard Herrmann? Oh, I'm totally for it. I think it's wonderful. It all depends upon, you know, if I'm writing a medieval score, you know, it might be cool to sort of involve the synthetic instruments, but I tend to like to separate aesthetics. Like I'm not a huge fan of incorporating synth in if the aesthetic it just doesn't because people have this sort of, you know, conception about synths and so as much as you want to try and be innovative for the sake of being innovative, you know, you have to be careful in the way that you do it. And I think Jeremy Soule, you know, in some of his atmosphere tracks for Skyrim and Oblivion, for example, he uses synth pads that he came up with, and it fits very well even in a medieval atmosphere. And Terraria has a nice combination of orchestral and synth sounds. So, and I think, so I think it's very interesting, and it's definitely something I want to get more into, especially like in the serious concert music world. But, you know, I find myself naturally compartmentalizing synth music and orchestral music just because I feel like I need to master the two individually before I can presume to put them together in a really coherent way. Thoughts on the Star? Oh, I love the prequel sound. I think the prequel soundtracks are better than the original soundtracks. I'll probably get murdered for saying that. I don't like the prequels better than the movies, but the soundtracks like I mean like the Phantom Menace. Honestly, I think the choir music when they were traveling to the Gungan city. Obviously, Duel of the Fates. Anakin's theme is just gorgeous, wonderful harmony and string writing. The pod racing, the flag parade, you know, the droid. Dum da da dum bum dum da dum da dum bum 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 bum. There's so many great tunes and melodies and just endless inspiration. I'm always amazed at how, despite this movie being like the least liked Star Wars movie, he just went all out. So yeah, I love the prequel. The prequel, and there's a lot of really devastatingly beautiful stuff, and the I haven't seen it in so long I don't even remember what it's called. Revenge of the Sith. What was your first composing job and how did you get it? My first paid composing job was actually for a game called Super Squares. That soundtrack might be on YouTube. It's a bum ba dum da dum da dum dum ba dum, and I found it on the Game Creators Forum. I went to a video game developer forum. I was starting to get into video game development, and I sort of just offered my services. I was just like, hey, I'll write music for free, and then the guy who I was writing music for actually ended up paying me because he liked the music a lot. And that was when I was about, I think I was 12. Yeah. So that was the first paid composing job that I got. When you sound a pitch, sequence pitch, sound long at these pitch. Yeah. Congrats and thank you. Hello, I'm American composer. Philip, my biggest fan. I am from Italy. I'm looking for a great read. Are there any books in music theory you can recommend? Nerdy is good. It can be harmony training whatsoever. Let's see. What are some good ones that are not super common? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the usual ones are pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of just theory texts in general, but some of the more esoteric ones I think are really, really interesting, but they're just almost impossible to read. Each sentence takes, like, you know, a week to figure out what it means. But honestly, as far as just like practical text, Thomas Goss's 100 orchestration tips, I just got so much out of that. That's a wonderful book. It's an ebook. It's a collection of like tips from a professional, super experienced orchestrator. All kinds of really practical things like that. As far as just like a really simple, like easy to get through theory book, the HarperCollins music theory text. It's not super. It's not very comprehensive, but it's a great introduction to theory. And again, some of the more like Cecil Forsyth, his orchestration book, it's not like super, but it's really interesting. It's an interesting read. Principles of Orchestration, obviously. And the latest version of the Adler is really great because it has an online audio. They at the Eastman School of Music, they recorded with their student orchestra, really good orchestra, all of the excerpts in the book, so you can go through the orchestration excerpt and then hear those. But again, I love reading. You know, I love reading texts and things. But so I find you get more interesting tidbits and things like, you know, the unanswered question, which is the book version of the lectures that Leonard Bernstein gave at Harvard. Really, really interesting. Again, some sort of people get all theoretically hung up over them because they're like, oh, it's not really music theory, it's not systematic, it's not scientific, he's just talking about his intuitions. But you get so many gold little nuggets and pieces, you know, out of Bernstein that you wouldn't get out of anything else, that it's just really great. And Bernstein has a lot of great, like, and Aaron Copland, What to Listen For in Music, that's a really great text as well. Also, Korsakov had, is it Korsakov or Tchaikovsky? No, it's Korsakov. Korsakov has a good book on harmony that's a great start. Schoenberg has a book on music composition that's really good. And then Persichetti's Harmony. There are so many. Cool. Iceland, nice. What would you currently consider to be your weaknesses in terms of musical composition? That's a great question. There are so many to list. I think perhaps maybe a few. I think one weakness that I have is, it may not be perceived as a weakness, but I think it's certainly a weakness, is my tendency to think of like who I'm writing for, to the extent that when I write a concert piece of music, it's totally different from my film and game music. When I write film and game music, it's totally different from I feel like I could a little bit, maybe not be so afraid of writing something that's super easy and catchy and easy to get into. And even like my recent, you know, the second movement of my symphony, you know, that's like one of the most, as far as like, I don't want to say advanced. I mean, it is advanced. It's one of the most advanced things that I've written, and it's very much a concert piece, and it's not something you can just sit down and get into like the Mario theme, you know. So, and so there are a lot of people that come to that expecting my film and game music, and they're sort of like, I'm not really sure how to get into this. And then there are people that like that, but then they're like, oh, your film and game music, it's too simple, it's too cliche. So maybe like trying to sort of get the best of both worlds. And I know that's something a lot of composers try to do, and it's something that's really hard to do because they're two totally different worlds. Also longer forms. I have a tendency to think about small scale forms and sort of go with things that I know work. So I've been really purposefully trying to write larger scale pieces and figuring out, that's been my big focus that I've been working on is form and development, and how do I take motives and develop them, and why is this thing after this thing better than this thing after this thing? Not just the ideas themselves, but where you place them. How long does a transition need to be? How long do you need to build to something? How much is too much build, and how much is not enough build? You know, timing. Just one little bar can make all the difference. Those subtleties I'm really trying to develop. And I also am trying to sort of get more emotionally involved in music, because when I first started out, it was all about like feeling, and how can I, like, oh, that music, oh, that makes me feel like this crazy emotion, like how do I, like, I want to be able to replicate that. Only that music can make me feel that emotion, nothing else in life, and it's so unique. And so I want to sort of be able to create that type of thing in my own music, and the more that I've gotten into like the technique of composition, the more it's turned into a technical thing. And so I always sort of have to take a step back and remember this is why I'm writing music, and there's nothing wrong with, especially when you get into the academic world, you sort of feel like you have these academic eyes peering out on you, like, oh, that part writing was not imperfect, and so you think, crap, everything has to be. But I don't think to me the most important thing is creating an emotional response, a genuine emotional response in the listener. And so my weakness, I think, a lot of time is to get so caught up in the technicalities that I kind of lose sight of that, a lot of the time. How do you put a price to your work the first time you're hired? That completely depends on. I would look up. There's a Film and Game Composers Forum. Let me look it up. What it's called. I've got this. I've got a file on my computer. Let me see if it's here. Actually, no, I don't think it must be on my external hard drive. But anyway, you can look up and see surveys, film and game. Just type in Film and Game Music Survey 2017, and it'll tell you what the general rates are. So you can just have a sense of what the industry is offering, depending on instrumentation and whether or not you're, and also whether or not you get royalties. But that's a huge topic. That's not really something I can sort of get into now. But it totally depends upon your whether or not they came to you or you came to them, how experienced you are as a composer, how extensive your portfolio is, and how, like, if you're just starting out and you just want to get work, accept anything and everything that comes along, even if it doesn't necessarily pay super well. And if you're just starting out at the beginning, do free work, definitely. Whereas when you sort of get to the point where you have more than enough things to fill on your plate, you can take the projects that pay the most, or maybe take on a passion project that doesn't pay as much, but it's going to pay out down the road because your music in combination with the project, it's such a good project you're working on that may allow your music to get some exposure because the game's really good or the film's really good that it may not normally get. So it's a constant. You're thinking about the long term, thinking about marketing yourself. Do I need more money, or are there other things that I need to worry about? And sometimes you just have bills to pay. But so yeah, that's really too big of a conversation to get into at this point. But I would definitely look up what the industry standard rates are. And I would ask, either me in a Facebook message or in a Gmail, or ask an experienced composer, how do I approach that type of thing? And I'm sure there are some good articles written on that. But yeah, that's a giant topic. Any suggestion on writing a love theme without going for those cliches like mixolydian and flat six or alien? Yeah, so what I try to do is think about, okay, why do people use this for a love theme? You know what I mean? And so sort of like, how like if you're in love with someone, it's almost painful how much you're in love with them. And so it's sort of like going from a minor, a half diminished chord to half diminished, borrowing from minor, da da, beep boo boo boo, right? F minor 6 to C major. It's because it's like when you finally arrive, it's like a hug, and at the same time, it's so there's a certain give and take and a certain pull and weight to it. So rather than necessarily saying, okay, F minor add 6 to C is a love theme cliche, figure out why is that turned into a love theme cliche? What is it about it that sounds like a metaphorical representation of love, right? And then come up with another progression that's different, that has the same type of thing, but it's a different progression. So you can be original, but you still get the love sound because you understand what made that thing sound, like you're in love, and then take that knowledge, that sort of molecular lowest quantum level knowledge, and then grow a new tree from it, if that makes sense, rather than just copying the same tree on the surface level, or just growing something unrelated that doesn't sound like a love theme. That's a bit conceptual. I'm not sure if that helps, but that's kind of how I tend to approach it. Favorite mode, dude? Here. 7 Days to Die anecdote sounds so familiar to me. Flat 6 is nice, yeah. Stupid Arrows, right? Yeah, right. Dylan. Oh my gosh. Is Mixolydian Flat 6 really that prevalent? Actually, I have a hard time finding music that features it. Yeah, I don't like to think about Mixolydian Flat 6. To me, like, that's its own new mode. I don't like to relate modes to other modes unless you actually have both modes through the course of a piece of music. And then you can look at them. I don't like the idea that, like, the Mixolydian mode is just major flat 7, right? No, there's no reason to say that any more than to say that the major mode, Ionian, is just Mixolydian, sharp 7, right? You see what I'm saying? There's no reason that Aeolian or Ionian should be the center of the world when it comes to music. That certainly is the case historically, but I will defend until the cows come home, and I'm happy to take up the argument with anybody who wants to argue with it over email, that there is absolutely no reason why Aeolian or Ionian should be the center of the universe. It's a continuous spectrum, and if you go to the Lydian mode, you know, if you start raising all of your intervals such that you get to the Lydian mode, right? Well, if you can't raise any intervals anymore, what happens is you end up raising the tonic degree of the Lydian mode, and then suddenly you get a new mode, the Locrian mode. So Lydian actually does go into Locrian. It's just at that point you're changing the tonic, right? And so you get a new collection of pitches that doesn't necessarily involve F. And that brings into the whole conversation whether or not you are tonicizing a tone, or whether or not you were just using a collection of pitches, right? Because set theory, pitch class sets, is a way of thinking that just involves creating brightness or darkness, moving around the circle of fifths by taking a collection of 7 pitches and raising or lowering them such that you can perceive the fact that they're raised and lower. You're not adding tones, you're taking away tones, you know, like chromatic passing tones would be, but you're just qualitatively changing the tones. And then whether or not you want F to feel like the tonic is a totally different, you know, you have brightness or darkness in terms of verticalization, and then you have brightness or darkness in terms of motion, taking the collection of pitches and raising or lowering them, moving around in the circle of fifths. And then, of course, once you start using 7 pitches and you use 8 pitches or all 12 pitches or even microtones, you have to have a new system of creating brightness or darkness. But anyway, that's a giant conversation. Super ultra hyper mega metalydian is roots, definitely. Actually, I'm quite on board with how Collier thinks about theory. The way that he thinks about brightness and darkness in the circle of fifths and approaching harmony and not thinking it just from a major and minor perspective. The way he and I think is quite similar. Ultra Phrygian, you guys are funny. Super Logran. Write 24 preludes and fugues, but call the major key ones mixed leading. That's funny. Really did I actually thought of doing a set of preludes and fugues with just different modes. I don't have any opinions on UNT and their comp degree. I haven't researched them, unfortunately. So I'm self-taught in piano, and I try to create orchestra music, but I don't know how to write for other instruments. Do you have any advice? Like instruments other than piano? Well, the basic thing is just to learn all the ranges of the instruments. Like it's a lot of information, but you can't get around it. You just really need to learn all that. I would start with Orchestration Online, the YouTube channel. Check out his music. Listen to all of his tips. I would definitely, if you can afford, get the Adler book because it's a great start, and listen to those examples to sort of show you how those instruments are written. And then the next step is just figure out what the general instrumentation is. 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 4 horns, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, tuba, harp, 3 percussionists, timpani, and strings. And then just try and write something for that, even if it's atrocious, even if you don't even know how to write for it. And then take that and then hand it to a composer who's willing to look at it. I'm always happy to look at these things if I have time to send it over. And then they'll tell you, okay, this is nice, this bar is nice, but that doesn't quite work. You know, the wind instruments need to breathe, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's good to sort of get the information gradually as a response to your own music, because if you just try and read all of this information and just sort of absorb it, it's impossible to just get it when it's all just concepts. And you have to be able to apply it to your own music. So that's what I did. I just started writing orchestral music, and it was terrible. It was terrible. And I started posting it on Orchestration Online, the Facebook forum, and I was just like, guys, just rip it apart. And they're like, okay. And then they rip it apart. And then I write something else, I'm trying to fix some of the mistakes that I made. And then it gradually gets to a point where you stop making basic errors, and you start getting into sort of more advanced conceptual stuff, and it starts getting really, really fun at that point. But yeah, I mean, that's the best way. First, just learn and if you, it's good to, you know, like the strings are the backbone of the orchestra in a lot of, you know, traditional music. So it might be good to just start with the string section and get really comfortable writing for them, because they're very similar to each other. Bowing principles maintained across different string instruments. So just learn the strings, become comfortable with them, and then sort of make sure that other people, you know, when you write things, show it to a string player, make sure it's all playable. Once you're comfortable with that, then sort of do brass. That's generally how orchestration is taught, is you do strings, you know, winds, brass, percussion, and then at the very end you mix and mingle them all together. You ever enter composing? No, I have never done a composing competition. I feel like I need to. I've just never had because they usually don't pay well. It takes a lot of time. The type of music that I write isn't always acclimated. Like the thing that I just wrote is probably the closest thing that comes to like a concert music, because they really like advanced stuff. They like non-tonal stuff. They like, if you're not writing something hip, it's really difficult to like win a composition competition because they really value innovation. Whereas I just sort of want to write beautiful music. So I just think it's definitely something I'd love to do in the future, but the fact that it takes so much time, and I'd rather devote that time to my game and film, because like as much as I like writing concert music, to me it's all just an exercise in developing my skills and abilities such that they complement my game. Like I am interested in writing video game music. That is at the top of the list. I want to write music for video games, and so I'm exploring all this other stuff, jazz, and atonality and advanced harmony, and Hindemith and classical music and concert music. Oh, to me, these are all things that are sort of stranded together and supporting this. I want to be a versatile video game composer. So currently, composition competition is not, to me, a thread that is strongly enough connected to that for me to justify taking up the time to involve myself in it, if that makes sense. Waiting for you to compose diatonic pieces in half sharp and half light keys. I've experimented with that a little bit. I think it's interesting, but it's yeah, that's a whole big world that opens up. Yeah, you're welcome. Focus, Mr. Bajak. The video of Harry Potter Quidditch segment deconstruction. How is that John Williams composed so many lines using so many harmonies and still sounds so right? I mean, counterpoint, harmony, and like if you it's just counterpoint, harmony, and balance. You compose a good melody. Counterpoint allows you to compose other melodies around it that still work with it, and it all works together and they complement. It's not busy. And then harmony allows you to support the counter melodies and melodies such that one chord there's a sense of motion towards resolution. So it's not just random things happening, but you feel like you're going somewhere. And then balance, when orchestrating, just allows all of the individual parts to be heard in the hierarchy that you want them to be heard in, so that the important things aren't covered up by the less important things. So I know it's a really simplistic answer, but honestly, like if you just like really get into counterpoint, really get into harmony and part writing, and get into orchestration, I mean those are the tools that you need to be able to compose something that has lots of lines and harmonies and still sounds right. What is your woodwind section? I can use standard to change it up. It depends. If I'm writing for a film or game score, I'm only gonna use whatever I need. You know what I mean? So if I happen to not need a bassoon, I might not need a bassoon. And at the same time, if I'm writing some sort of like dark, medieval kind of music, and I want some nice bassoon part writing, I'm going to use 3 bassoons and a contra, or even 4 bassoons. Even though like it would be hard to have 4 bassoons and a real orchestra, that'd be like winds and fours. That'd be a very big orchestra, like a Mahler orchestra. So I just pull out whatever I need, and the auxiliaries are great. Like bass clarinet has a unique timbre, so I'll pull out bass clarinet because I really like bass clarinet. Or I'll pull out English horn because English horn has a nice smooth sort of character that's a bit less nasally in this tenor register than oboe. I have all these instruments sort of characterized, and maybe it's easy to sort of pigeonhole, to sort of like, oh, I only like to use this for this reasons. But I try to, for me, it's good to start with the pigeonhole and then to branch out, as opposed to just immediately writing things for the instrument that don't work well, that is unidiomatic, and that just doesn't sound good. You know what I mean? Start with a pigeonhole, and then expand the pigeonhole to the extent that you really know how to write well for the instrument, and then you can write things like the super high oboe solo that Ravel wrote in Daphnis at Chloe, which is a marvelous piece of orchestration, but he only wrote it because he knew that phenomenal players would be able to pull it off, and because the timbre of the oboe at that register is absolutely needed. No other instrument can produce that sound. But I mean, standard woodwinds, it's just, winds and twos with auxiliaries. So like 1 piccolo, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, English horn, 2 clarinets, bass clarinet, and then 2 bassoons and contra bassoon. 4 horns, 6 horns, 8 horns. I mean, Powell uses 12. He uses 12 in How to Train Your Dragon, which is a bit excessive, but you get a big epic sound. 6 is really nice because it divides by 2 and by 3. You can get triads with 2 horns on each note, which is really nice. And you can also do something which I like to do, where you have 3 horns play melody, and then the other 3 horns play accompaniment. So the melody pops out because of 3 horns instead of just 1 on a solo. 4 is a bit more limited. It's a bit awkward if you have like a triad. You just leave the 4th horn out. Does it double one of the notes? Does it double something else? Blah blah blah. And then 3 trombones, 3 trumpets. I don't generally use 4 trumpets just because 3 trombones, trumpets and trombones sound great in triads. And they double each other so well. Whatever you do on the trumpets, they sound well with the, And so, 3 cylindrical trumpets and 3 cylindrical trombones balance each other very well, and 6 horns, because horns are a bit quieter and a bit softer in tone because they're conical. 6 horns balances very well with 3 trumpets and 3 trombones. Is it possible that you can listen to one of my compositions? Something that was called composition on my channel. Yeah, send me an email. I'll try. It's just so hard. I would love to be able to listen to everything that everybody sends, but I'm telling you, my email inbox is just so full. And I try, anytime I have some sort of time, I try to sort of get to things. But I'm the type of person that, like, I really want to give, like, detailed feedback, and, like, I don't just want to be like, oh yeah, that's cool, and then just send you an email. So if I don't respond to you a long time, that doesn't mean that I'm never going to respond. Sometimes I'll respond to people a year after they send their message. So for anybody, feel free to send whatever you want to me, and it'll stay there, and I'll put it in a folder, and I will read it at some point. But it's just at the point now, the amount of, people, since I've handed my email address out to everybody, the amount of people that email me and send me their stuff, it's just humanly impossible with my schedule to be able to get to all of it. But I try to, get to as much as I possibly can. I will be right back. I'm going to use the restroom. All right, let me make sure everybody can still hear me. That would be tragic if I was like saying all this stuff and nobody can hear me. Oh my gosh, so many. Okay, looks like it's pretty good. Whoa, so many. Holy moly. Okay. Open section, yeah. Okay, compositions, right? Okay. Google Doc with the CRs are terrible. So many people have made documents of CRs. That's so cool. That makes me so happy. Choose your CR from a chart. I play it for them, and they begin their composition. You think there's any merit to selling this as a composition flow? Oh yeah, absolutely. And I understand selling it from like a business perspective, but at the same time, it's just sort of like a moral obligation, an internally imposed moral obligation for me to just share everything that I know with the world and not charge for it. You know what I mean? Like I'll put ads on videos, or I'll put, and I may offer some stuff that I have to, I have to, like obviously I'll charge for one-on-one Skype lessons, or I might even like create a book or something where like the price of the book being produced basically needs to be refunded, but I want to try and make things as free. So if I would love to release like a systematic, ebook on CRs and stuff like that, but I would like to make it free, personally. Just because when I was younger and I wanted to learn this stuff, I didn't have access to a lot of money, and so like if someone had created the videos analyzing John Williams scores back when I was 13, like I would have freaked out over it. I would have been like, oh, like, because that was what I really wanted, was just like, to get my hands on the John Williams scores. And when I finally could afford, or I think my parents got me one for my birthday, it was E.T. And then I opened up the score. I was like, holy crap, there's so much going on. I have no idea what's happening. And it took years for me to even figure out what was going on. So I'm sort of trying to kind of be the person, because it took me so much work to get up to this point, that I'm trying to kind of be the person that I wish that I had when I was younger, which I think a lot of people tend to do that type of a thing. Yeah, again, cats, please feel free to send me your stuff and I'll check it out. And again, if anybody, I actually have quite a few, because the new semester has begun, I have quite a few open slots for Skype lessons. So if anybody is interested in Skype lessons, go ahead and send me an email. You know, we could just do one and see whether or not, you know, you'll get something out of it. But I think that's a good way, even if it's just like one lesson, just to sort of talk about your music or something. That's a good way to you know, one-on-one is a lot better, and in person is a lot better than, you know, email, chat, or, you know, like a more informal place like this. I mean, a more formal place like this. John Williams is a flagrant violator of rule against consecutive open bets and consecutive forces without third underneath. Bob Williams is this too. I've been hoarding the C70. Yeah, that's a great score. I hope I achieve the banal becoming transcendent with the outer of the Dakota for my fairy tale picture because Dan moved. You're funny, Philip. Josh, your mouth, the English pastoral. Yeah, yes, indeed. Indeed. Do you write your orchestral pieces on the piano first and orchestrate? Do you orchestrate as you're writing them? Yeah, okay, so this is a big... I don't want to get too rabbit trailing. I've kind of talked about this a little bit, but... Do I sketch? No. When you're starting out and you have... Your brain has difficulty, you know, when anybody, it doesn't matter, I don't care if you're Mozart, when you first look at an orchestral score, you're like, oh my gosh, there are so many staves, how am I ever in my life going to be able to process all that's happening on this page? It's completely overwhelming, okay? And 4 years later, if you do it every day, suddenly you can open up a score and just immediately know what's going on. And it's amazing how that happens. It's like reading. You know, first you're like one letter at a time, a word is hard, a sentence, and then suddenly you're just skim reading 500 words a minute, and you know. Once when you're starting out, I think it's a good idea to sketch because you really need to focus on things like part writing, and voicing and making sure all the notes work together well, and you haven't composed something that's sort of messy and doesn't work well. You just want to make sure that the notes work. Once you got the notes under your control and that sort of becomes an internal thing and you don't need to see it right in front of you to understand what's happening in your head, then I think it's a good idea to sort of go to the orchestration because, you know, to me, I'm not the type of person that, like, I write the notes, and a lot of composers do this, and there's nothing wrong with this. Like, Bach was very much a composer. I mean, Bach was a great orchestrator, but Bach was a composer who, the notes are the notes, and they're great notes, and you can put the notes in any instruments, and it's still great, right? I am very picky in particular when it comes to texture. If I'm writing for a flute in its lower register, what I write is going to be completely different from a clarinet in its low register, or for a horn in its... So, like, for me, in terms of timbre and texture, I'm so... picky and sensitive about different registers of instruments and using just the individuality of their colors that I really like to write for the orchestra. You know, like, for example, the second movement of my symphony, that piece of music just would not have turned out like it did, and it would not have been possible had I sketched it first and then put it on the orchestra. And okay, well, you can say, okay, well, I could sketch it, and then I could just sort of write in the sketch, oh, horns, blah, blah, blah. And that makes sense from a logistical, like if you were back in the time of pencil and paper. But with Sibelius, copy and paste is so easy that to me, there's no reason why I can't just write onto the full. And that doesn't mean that sometimes sort of like I'll want some nice little counterpoint, and I'll go and out of the Sibelius and open up a new thing and just sort of work out some counterpoint or part writing for like 16 bars, and then take that and poop it back onto Sibelius. I can do that. So I do that type of sketching. That's totally fine. But I generally like to write for the orchestra because, you know, again, you're writing for these instruments, for their individual qualities, and you write idiomatically for the best. You're showing them in their best possible light. So that's just my philosophy. And, you know, and there are some utterly brilliant orchestrators, you know, like Ravel, for example, that took his piano music and translated it to the orchestra. But even when he did that, you know, he totally changed the music so that it wasn't pianistic and re-orchestrated. He still very much was writing for the instruments. It's not like he just took this piano sketch and sort of copied and pasted it onto the orchestra. He very much recomposed it from the ground up in a way that only he, as the composer, would have felt the freedom to do. And which is one of the reasons why I'm just not... I've tried to do arranging and orchestration jobs, and I've you know, they've been edifying, and I'm glad that I've done them. But at the same time, I just am a composer. Like, I'm so nitpicky about part writing and about timbre and texture that I find it very difficult unless I'm given complete freedom. I'm just such a control freak that I have difficulty arranging other pieces of music for different instrumentations and ensembles because I just get so attached to the particular way that it is. Do you consider your downtime to be procrastination or just a needed part of the process? It depends upon what you do in your downtime. You know, if you're specifically trying to sort of cultivate a mindfulness and cultivate an aura of creativity, then yeah, it's a part of the process. But if you're just sort of like, even like a video game, am I playing a video game because I want to play the video game, or am I playing a video game for inspiration? So I think it's just important to don't use it as an excuse, but to be very intentional about if you're going to have downtime and you want that downtime to be a part of the process, then do something in that downtime that you know is going to be beneficial to the process. Don't just say, oh, okay, I'm gonna go play, I'm gonna go make a Mario Maker level, even though there's not really necessarily creatively that might not, unless you just want to get your mind off of it, in which case that's totally fine. But I don't know. What are the best ways to practice audiation? Audiation. I don't think I've heard that term. Does that mean like the ability to sing back intervals and things, or to hear things? Audiation is the foundation of musicianship. It takes place when we hear and comprehend music for the sound, for which the sound is no longer, may never have been present. One may audiate when listening to music performed by audition, playing by ear, improvising. Interesting. Fascinating. So basically that just sounds to me like ear training. So best way to practice ear training is to, you know all the normal ways. I mean, you can find so many, like rhythmic dictation, audio dictation, intervallic dictation, singing things back in tune. There are some Pitch Perfect. There's some nice apps for that. You can find all these things. One thing that may not, two exercises which I haven't seen anywhere else, which may be helpful, something fresh perhaps. One is to look at a piece of music you've never heard before. Get the score for it. Look at it. See if you can hear it in your head. Really try to hear it in your head. Even if it's not necessarily the specific notes, just see if you can hear the texture of it. And then listen to the piece of music and see how closely what you tried to hear in your head and imagine is to the actual piece of music. And the music correcting your preconceptions is a very healthy thing for you to orient your ear and be able to look at a piece of score and hear it in your head. Another thing is to listen to a piece of music and figure out, is that a clarinet, or is that a bass clarinet, or is that an English horn? To listen to a piece of music and see if you can, like, by ear, transcribe it out, right? And then once you've transcribed it, check it in the score and see how closely you got to the score. That's another great exercise for audiation. That's sort of like doing something and then correcting your ear. It's sort of like when you're watching, again, to use the chess analogy, when you're watching, like, greats play a chess game, and there's an opportunity for tactics, and the chess analyzer always says, hey, stop, pause the video, see if you can come up with your own move, because if you just let the video play and the move presents itself, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's an obvious move. But if you try to preempt what the good move is, and you actually do the wrong move, and you see what the right move was, you can compare the relationship of the right move to what you thought was the right move, and use that correlation to improve yourself and sort of reorient your thinking process in such a way that you may be able to come up with the correct move in the future. Whereas if you don't sort of try and come up with the answer yourself, there's no correction. You're just sort of spoon-fed the right answer, and you don't know necessarily why it's the right answer, and you're not sure whether or not you would have been able to come up with the right answer, if that makes sense at all. Yeah, no, I agree, Joshua, about the downside being in university is the amount of curriculum projects versus personal projects. Searching for some info on choral intonation. Do you know of any sources? What do you mean? Like, you'll have to give me more information about that. I mean, there are things of, like, the types of, like, F major is a key that singers tend to go flat in. There's also sort of like in barbershop quartets, the fact that certain chords have ringing overtones to them because they try to tune them with the Overtone Series. In terms of, like, how you can deal with intonation. Like, when you say intonation, like, that sounds to me more like the pedagogy of, like, singing, like how to get good intonation with singing, and how to, like, when your singer's in a lower register, they tend to go sharp. When they're high register, you tend to want to keep them in their tessitura. Yeah, I'm just not sure what you're asking about, Andreas. So see if you can reformat that question. Haven't listened yet, but after this video, I'm going right there. Always pumped hearing music. Are you going to sing while... No, I'm not going to sing. That would just further kill my voice, and you guys do not want to hear that. Do you ever dabble in atonal music and similar post-modern music with less conventional structure? Yeah, I mean, it's still... Well, conventional... What's conventional? I mean, at this point, like, atonal music is conventional. It's literally been around since, like, the early 1900s. So, at this point, it's just as conventional as Mozart in terms of, like, oh, these are just ways that people used to write music in the past. So, but, I've totally dabbled in it. I think it's very useful to... I don't have, a fundamental problem with atonality. I just have a fundamental problem with atonality replacing tonality as, like, the better way to write music. And we don't really get that nowadays. We don't really get that... I mean, that's a really old-fashioned attitude. Most schools now tend to be very open towards tonality as well as atonality. Pretty much it's just anything is fair game, whatever you want to do. Um, but so for me, as far as again, everything is towards this video game composition. So like atonality, if I want to create something creepy or something, insane or something, the 12-tone system allows you to avoid repetition and pointing out certain tones as being more important than others. And the fact that you repeat every other tone before you play the previous tone means that you don't get a lot of implication of tonality. It's actually really difficult to just sit down and write chromatic music and just sort of screw around on the piano and make it sound scary. It usually just sounds dumb. But if the 12-tone system, the aleatoric music, and retrograde, and a lot of those, and especially set theory, pitch class theory and set theory, I find really, really interesting because you can sort of come up with consistent intervallic structures that you can use across the span of a piece of music, even though you don't have a sense of tonality and the circle of fifths that you use. The consistency of vertical sonority allows you to have an aesthetic. So there's still a sense of consistency, and even at like 12 tonality, even though 12 tonality, I kind of like that. The 12-tone system, even though it seems to not have any consistency, it actually is very consistently inconsistent, right? It's like that TED Talk where they tried to create the ugliest piece of music by, mathematically putting things in the most pattern-free type. When you're composing a certain type of music that you don't want to have patterns, like, Dead Space, for example, Dead Space soundtrack, writing scary music is actually harder than a lot of people think, and those studies can be very useful. So yeah, that's, something I'm going to do. Why there's so much hate against Hans Zimmer in the circle of composers and orchestrators? I like Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer's his soundscapes, and he samples and he's like, as far as he's a timbral and textural genius. I stand by that. Every composer has sort of their own thing. Like John Williams. John Williams is like a melodic genius, and even in a lot of cases a harmonic and part writing genius. But you could say that texturally he does a lot of the same things. He uses a lot of the same setups, and he's not particularly innovative orchestrally in most of his music. So you could look at John Williams and say, oh, okay, blah blah blah. So the classical era was more about, melody and harmony and development, whereas, sort of nowadays people are really experimenting with texture and timbre. That's what everybody is focused on. And so, Hans Zimmer, like Inception and Interstellar, and even some melodies. I mean, he's written some great stuff, like Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron has some great melodic material. So yeah, I mean, I totally understand, like, I don't have any hate for him at all, but I think the reason is just because he's so famous, just because everybody says he's the best composer of all time, which I don't like making qualitative, For me, the best composers of all time are the ones that sort of had everything, you know what I mean? Like Samuel Barber, where it's like, you're original, you're innovative, you have a totally unique style, your melodies are both original and catchy and wonderful, you have utter control over counterpoint and part, you know what I mean? You sort of have everything going for you if we're going to talk about the qualitatively best composer. But I'm just not interested in, like, comparing composers. To me, that's not constructive. You're not getting anything out of that, and I don't like to pit my two favorite composers against one another. And it's the fact that he doesn't use sheet music, he does the piano roll, so people are like, oh, he's just a guitarist, who was, he's just a rock band musician, and sort of like, but, that's all complete BS. So, there's no reason why sheet music, knowing how to read sheet music makes you a better composer. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with learning sheet music, and it's a very useful skill, but if you're like Hans Zimmer, you can hire other orchestrators. I think maybe, like, the fact that his name gets put on everything when there are a lot of other collaborators like Claude Spell, maybe there's something morally questionable about that, definitely. But there's no denying that the man is a genius at what he does, and he certainly has, for better or worse, depending upon your subjective view on the situation, has totally changed the climate of film music and even classical music. And there are few things to be said, that's something that cannot be said of all composers. It's a ratio. Yeah, right, I know. Ratio, fraction, same thing. Semantics. Am I still better? What is your favorite way of big symphonic score rating? Audiation, listening to a recording, copying every part, intonation, score. I like to just look for a particular thing. Like, just look for the harmony, and just do a harmonic analysis of the whole piece. And then do an orchestral analysis. Just look at the string writing. Every time I go back to a score that I've looked through a billion times, I try to approach it with a new set of glasses on. Here are my harmony glasses. Here are my counterpoint glasses. Here are my balance glasses, just looking at the dynamic levels. And if you do that, you constantly come back to it and you get new things out of it. And it helps narrow down your focus so you're not just sort of like this giant wash of stuff is coming over and you're not really getting anything out of it. When are you posting a live performance of your symphony? Very soon. I have the recording. I need to add. Our harpist was sick and unable to perform the harp part, so I need to go and add the harp part in. And so, but I have all the files, and I'm going to do that. I promise you. Good day from Germany. Hello. Glad you like my videos. Now you're singing. Last one. What composers have you been listening to the most lately? Radhavara, absolutely. I've also some skunk funk. You ever heard of that? It's a jazz tune. That's such a great. Oh my gosh. Let me pull it up. I'm obsessed with that. I get obsessed with like pieces. Some skunk funk. It's in the Lydian thing that the bass does. I'll show you like 30 seconds of this. Anyway, I don't want to get flagged for copyright. But Breckner Brothers, some skunk funk. I've been obsessed with that piece of music lately. Oh, it's amazing. I'm really getting into the Radhavara symphonies. I've been kind of moving back. I started with the 8th and moved 7th, 6th. His Radhavara's 6th symphony uses electronics, synthesizers in combination with orchestra, and it's really interesting. And the Mozart Requiem, I've heard before, but I recently got the score for that and been delving into that. That's just a wonderful piece of music. I've also been getting into a lot of ambient music, just exploring lots of ambient, and a lot of jazz too. I've been really focusing on jazz lately. I've been listening to some Dirty Loops. Let's see what else. I feel like there was one. Oh yeah, I just discovered Poulenc's Piano Concerto. Is it his number 2? It's like yadadum dadadum budadum yadadum badadadadada. It's a beautiful. Oh, it has some wonderful material. So I've been really getting into that. Also, Witlutzowski, is that how you say its name? Yeah, Lutoslawski. Slavsky. Forgive me if I'm butchering that name, but he has a piano sonata, and it's gorgeous. I've been really, digging that piece of music and listening to that lately. And also Maurice Duruflé's Requiem. Oh my gosh, that is just a sublime piece of music. Wonderful, wonderful. Those are the things that I've been really getting into. Yeah, Gordon, good to see you. Thanks for having me. What composers have been listening to? Yeah, just your quick mind giving a challenge. It depends upon the orchestra. Like, I want to challenge them to the extent that I'm not insulting their intelligence. If you write something sort of like super dumbed down, I want to take advantage of what they can do. But if I'm writing for a college orchestra as opposed to writing for samples, as opposed to writing for high schoolers, as opposed to writing for, if I have the opportunity, like the Nashville Symphony Orchestra or something, I think you need to write. You don't need to write hard music for the sake of hard music, but at the same time, if like for example, like Hedwig's theme, the string runs, the crazy string runs. That's an artistic decision, right? That sort of whirlwind, along with the Celestia, creates this magical sense of this owl flying around. So it's something that he said, oh, okay, I'm not trying to do something hard for the sake of being hard. It's something that artistically would add a lot to this piece. And I know that my players can do it because they're like the LA session players or the London Symphony Orchestra. I can't remember who performed that particular soundtrack, but he knows that his players are capable of performing it. So it's just sort of be aware of be aware of how big the circle is of what's possible for your players, and then extend your reach as far as you need to for artistic reasons, if that makes sense. Oh yeah, VR games. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about VR. That's something that I want to get into full tilt, is get in like with a VR studio. I am so fascinated about creating dynamic music, and especially music that, where different instruments could be located inside a three-dimensional space, and so when you move your head around, the processors can sort of like, have certain sounds being generated from certain directions, and when you move around, it's a three-dimensional sort of like, it takes it to a whole new level, and also, even just dynamic music in general, you know, creating music that where you have like sort of like this 4-bar loop that can go into any one of 8 other 4-bar loops. And so that creates all these possibilities, and depending on what you do, oh, it seamlessly goes into this loop, and then that goes into this loop, just creating a 3-dimensional piece of music that has, it's sort of like a story with multiple paths and endings. So that type of thing is fascinating to me, and VR is just on the cusp. It's in its baby stages, and so I'm really excited to try and get into that. I definitely think that's the future. I love reading text and things. Do you mind if certain parts of a piece may be boring to play for certain instruments? It's fair. Is it all fair as long as the overall music is good? I don't shy away from boring parts if it's something that's really needed. Like if the horns need a sort of like if they need to do an accompaniment, that's totally cool. If I'm writing for samples, I don't worry about that at all because I'm not offending real people, right? But if ever I'm writing a piece of music for people to perform, I do have the sense of, okay, I need to at least give them something interesting to play later. And I do try and see if I try to give everybody at least something interesting to play throughout the course of the music. So that's kind of my policy when it comes to that. Since when do you play the piano and where did you study? I started playing the piano when I was 5, just by ear. I started taking lessons. I actually frustrated a lot of my piano teachers because I used to learn the pieces by ear. I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience. But I didn't learn how to read sheet music until quite late in my life. So yeah, I took Suzuki methods. I've studied classically. I've studied with jazz. I've studied with a lot of different types of pianists. But as far as like, you know, music pedagogy, I took some theory classes at Artios Academy, some like basic theory. But beyond that, I haven't really like systematically studied music at a conservatory until here at Furman. So again, I really do believe a lot, 90% of what you can, and even like now, like I've gotten so much out of my Furman education, but you know, taking orchestration and theory and like I knew a lot of that stuff coming in just because I've studied it. So you can study a lot of that stuff out of college. What I've gotten out of college is the ability to collaborate with all these wonderful musicians on campus, which is difficult to do outside of college, and I can just hand them parts and pieces and be like, hey, horn player, can you play this? And they'll be like, no, let's see, I put my hand on the bell, I can choose the intonation, but that fingering is not, that stuff you're not going to get in a book. Schönberg books are hard to, yeah, well, a lot of composition books are hard to understand, but they're interesting. They're rewarding if you can attempt to, I don't know, I like ferreting out esotericism. It's just kind of an obscure puzzle. Don't seem the case when music change more for you, but surrounding my mission, I don't know. I think there are all kinds of things that are possible. Man, can you say good ancient virtual libraries? Well, what do you mean by ancient? Do you mean like ancient choir? Do you mean like, you know, Russian basso profundo? Or do you mean like ancient like Renaissance? Or what do you mean by instruments? Gershwin. Oh, I love Gershwin. Rhapsody in Blue is great, of course, masterpiece. I do like his piano concerto better. His piano concerto in F. I think it's a better piece than Rhapsody in Blue. It's a wonderful. I mean, he's a melodic mastermind, and I love melody, so you know, absolutely delicious stuff. How do you manage to focus on one piece of the game without getting sidetracked? Go from small pieces to larger ones. Well, if the sidetracked is getting distracted by like other stuff, you know, I don't know. I sort of wait until I'm in the mood to compose music and then I write music. So I don't have to worry about getting sidetracked because at the moment that I'm writing music, there's nothing else that I would rather be doing than writing the piece of music. You know what I mean? So I just love writing music so much that's not something that me personally I have to worry about a lot getting sidetracked because I just love writing music. It's like I like to write music more than, besides maybe like a good omelet, I think maybe is like slightly above writing music, like a really good omelet. Focus on integrated sound design, music will become emphasized with the VR game. Yeah, it's not just surround. Okay, so okay, surround mixing. This is something I'm going to do. 5.1, 7.1. We have 2 ears. Right, if you're in a theater, okay, fine. You know, you're just putting the speakers around you such that it's actually creating a more organic sound in the room. That makes sense. If you're VR, you're gonna have headphones on, you're gonna have a device on, and you're gonna be able to move around, right? So it's all about stereo. And if you look at like apps like Nature Space, they record 2 microphones at the exact distance that ears are apart with the same hertz, frequency, the same equalization and filter. And it's completely 3-dimensional. It's wonderful. Better than 5.1 or 7.1 ever would be. Because we have 2 ears, there's no need to have 5.1 or 7.1 unless you're in a large room and trying to facilitate a large amount of people, right? So the important thing, what I'm talking about, is algorithmic, where you create, because you can render polygons and textures and shaders, and when you move to this place, the sun is now shining down at this thing, the shader is looking at the texture and sort of, you know, figuring out, okay, this, because of the shadows in this texture, it looks like this, so we sort of raise it, you know, and reflect on this thing as opposed to that. You can do the same types of things with audio, and not a lot of people have done that a little bit with sort of stereo, like Dead Space, you know, where you hear a sound sort of going like, right, and you hear, but you can hear where things are located with only 2 ears. So I think the more important thing is, to me, you can create a piece of music which has different elements sort of coming at you from space, from underneath you, from over by the side, and make the music as sort of just, the music is just this sort of God mode thing that's happening above you, unrelated to the game. The music feels like it's coming from the game, which can be, you know, something that goes hand in hand with VR because of the fact that you're actually moving around with your head as opposed to just moving your mouse around, but your head is being completely static. It's a greater sense of immersion. How many rewrites, corrections do you generally offer your employer during Project 3? As a high school student, can I get some insight to help me write a short film score for an unbalanced ensemble to be performed live for a team? For an unbalanced, when it comes to the unbalanced ensemble, if you're recording it with microphones, you know, you can fix a little bit of the balance in the. But I would just look at what you have. Like if you have like brass and strings, and the strings don't balance out the brass, just try and make them complementary to each other. Try and adjust it dynamically. Make the horns mezzo piano and the strings, you know, forte. Or adjust the mics. I generally don't like to adjust too many things in the mix and try to make it sound acoustically as good as possible. You can also do lots of passes. You know, if you have if you have a string quartet, you can record it 4 times, and you get the sound of 16 players as opposed to 4 players. So there are lots of things that you can do. Oh, to be performed live. Yeah, if you're performing live, then yeah, I would definitely try to make it as acoustic as possible. I mean, that's just like balance. Even if you're, it doesn't matter what instrumentation you're dealing with, the balance is going to be the same. You know what I mean? Instruments still balance the same. So I would just, I can't really give specific feedback about that unless I know, unless I look at your piece of music, see the specific things you're trying to accomplish, and know your specific instrumentation, then I might be able to present possible solutions. But just that's too general of a question for me to be able to answer. Sorry. How often use pitch class sets? I find Alan Buchan's videos sort of versatile can be. Yeah, I use them quite a bit in ambient music. In my latest second movement of my symphony, I used quite a bit of pitch class set theory. I often integrate pitch set theory as a method of voicing harmonies, which are constructed from the harmonic relativity standpoint. So I sort of blend it with other things. Greetings from Czech Republic. In film scoring, when is editing video scene according to done score used? And when is better to compose a score to already edited video scene? Generally, if I understand the question you're asking, generally you should be given a locked picture, right? There are some cases where, like, you know, if you're really lucky, if you have a good relationship, like Hans Zimmer will write music ahead of time, and then Christopher Nolan's editors will actually edit the film to match you know, Zimmer's music. And of course the famous, you know, E.T. example, the ending scene of E.T. is a good example of that. So, you know, sometimes in rare cases, you know, you might be able to write music and then the picture's up. But usually they give you a locked picture and you have to write against that. And that's a whole skill in and of itself. It's a lot harder back with punch cards in streamers back in the olden days where you had to sort of conduct. But now with computer software, it's pretty easy to just sort of play it click against a thing, see where things line up, and if things don't line up, adjust the tempo mathematically or add or take out a beat. And there are very clever ways of accommodating this. One of my favorites is like in E.T., there are moments in the score where he needs to sort of take out a beat. He has 1, 2, 1, 2, and he just needs to take out an eighth note. So it's 1, 2, 3. He changes it to a bar of 3, 8, which is basically like 1.54. In order for the music to fit a particular scene. But rather than it sounding contrived, like, oh crap, I just took out an eighth note to make it happen, he sets that up as a musical idea for musical reasons, such that when he does it out of necessity, it sounds like it was done musically and not like he was contriving the music to fit the picture. So, bayam, 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 bayam. He does 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So at the very beginning of the piece, he sets up that 1, 2, 3 as a musical idea, and then so it's okay. You're like, okay, that's one of the ideas in this music is 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then later on, if he ever needs to like sort of adjust the time signature and take away just an eighth note just to get the music to fit a hard cut, like bicycles taking off or something, he can do it, and it's not going to sound contrived because it was set up musically. So that's a I never believe composition competitions that say any aesthetic accepted I have at similar pieces that are not really that complex and tonal. Yeah, I mean, it's just if you write something that's like a beautiful score, really well notated, well constructed, and it all depends upon the judges. You're writing for the judges, and that's just I would, to me, it's sort of like, there are other ways of making money than composition competitions, more reliable ways of making money. And I'm not really interested in having a flag sort of saying, oh, I won this composition competition, because to me, like, people really don't take things. I don't take composers seriously if they have if they merely have won an award. I'm like, oh, congratulations, you won an award. But like, I'm still going to like or not like your music based upon your music and not necessarily based upon the award. It can definitely put your music in front of like, if you want to be a concert music composer, yeah, you should definitely write for competitions, because if you win, you get an opportunity for your music to be performed by a big ensemble, and that ensemble and the conductor of that ensemble, you're gonna have a great recording for your portfolio, as well as the fact that the conductor for the ensemble, if they like your piece, they might commission you to write more things in the future. But again, I'm interested in writing game music, and so that's sort of a direction, and that's a different direction that I want to take. So it's just not advantageous for my particular career. Favorite Mahler Symphony 9. And that chorale at the movement 4, and then the horn climax. Oh, it's, without words. When working with VSTs, what do you use in terms of sound libraries when you're going for a big epic sound? It's more mixing than anything. I mean, Cinesamples, because of the Sony scoring stage, you can get a big epic sound. If you want epic drums, Damage, you're not going to get better than Damage. If you want like epic trailer hits, Hybrid Tools is like the standard for that. But that's just a mixing and mastering thing. It's very easy to like make something not to sound dry and not super epic. But if you want like well mixed epic stuff, I would check out like Two Steps from Hell, especially like Canon and D. But again, sometimes like just like Jeremy Soule stuff, for example, it doesn't necessarily have to sound really big and crazy and epic in order to be epic. You know what I mean? Like the Seraph from Guild Wars 2 is so epic, and it's like it's not super loud. It's not that many instruments going, and he's not trying to just make it sound like the loudest gosh darn thing you've ever heard on the planet. But the music is really epic, right? So that's something to think about. Whoa, it just scrolled me down. Yeah, there's so many questions. Do you have a standard rate for your lessons? Yeah, go ahead and contact me privately and I'll let you know for that. I mean, my current rate, which if you're watching this video in the future may not be, my rate might have changed. My current rate, I might as well just say, is $45 an hour, and if you pay for 4 lessons at a time, it's $40 an hour, so there's a discount. What do you think of Kapustin? I have never heard of him. Please suggest to me music. Let me write his name down. I'm assuming he's a composer, if not a theorist. Oop. Insert elevator music. Composing something, and that's funny. What degree are you currently working on? If not, what degree do you have? I'm working on a bachelor's in music composition with a minor in jazz piano. What is your favorite composition book? I mean, I talked about my favorite books earlier. I really do like Schoenberg's. Would you mind reading out the questions you answered clearly? Sometimes it's not clear what the question was because you read it so quickly and softly. Yeah, sure. I tend to speak fast. How much do you charge for Skype lessons? Yeah, I just said that. Yep. Yeah, anybody feel free to, and I'll give you more information. Since you want to compose for games above all, maybe it might be better for you all to sort of go and see where I am at in the chat and then sort of read down, so you're kind of reading along with me, so you know what I'm looking at, but I'll try to be clear. Since you want to compose for games above all, how do you feel about it being standard that game composers also do things like sound effects and generally overseeing all the audio in the game? It all depends upon what you're interested in. I love creating. I've done sound effects for some games, and I think that's super fun. Thinking about like what you can use around you, like plastic wrap, for spiders moving around, like there and all the. I mean that's a other fascinating thing. So I've done that before, and I think it's fun. I don't think I'm nearly as good at it as I am at composing. So I don't really have an opinion about that. I enjoy it, and I don't think. That's all I can say about that. Is that I think it's fun to do that. Orchestration Online mentions that one can learn to listen to a score just by reading with training, but you don't need perfect pitch for that. Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, it's like you can just be like, where's my pitch? If you have any sort of like pitch producer, that gives you reference you need for everything, right? You know what I mean? So like, okay, so, the piece of music is in C. There we go. Bum, C minor, A flat major, D, B flat, F, E, G, C, D flat. You know what I mean? Like your ear, perfect pitch just means you can't get a pitch out of the air. But if you have good relative pitch, you give yourself one pitch, carry a tuning fork in your pocket, which I've done before. Or even like if you have relative pitch, sometimes you can even get yourself to just remember one note, and then any other note, if you have good relative pitch, all you need is one note, and you need to know what that note is, and then you've got everything else. So absolutely, I don't think you need perfect pitch for that. I don't have perfect pitch. Hey, big fan. Glad to hear that. What's the difference between texture and timbre? Kind of shady. Timbre is generally like individual instruments, like what's special about a violin as opposed to horn, blah, blah, blah. Texture is the combination of instruments together. And texture also, there's like the vertical texture, which is just combining different sonorities together. How does a horn blend with a bassoon as opposed to blending with a clarinet? What does that create? Mixing those colors. And then there's the horizontal idea of texture, which is sort of like, okay, the horns are playing. So you can say that's a ruckus texture. And you're not talking about, in that case, necessarily the timbres combining, but you're talking about the combination of the rhythmic and melodic ideas with that particular instrument. So texture is a bit more of an ambiguous term, but generally it's the combination of multiple timbres vertically and horizontally, whereas timbre is just the individual qualities of the sound, which, as we talked about before, has to do with the relative volume of the partials and the overtone series of those instruments, which is based on the materials that they're constructed of. Stephen Mackey. I feel like I've heard him, but I'll have to check him out. I'll put that down. After a while, we decided to sing the A-flat major and said it was much more in tune. Again, that has a lot to do with tessituras. Like, for example, if you're singing... So this goes back to the question, like, okay, writing for... How do you achieve good intonation in choir? They're just quirks about the human voice. Like tenors, for example, like... Mom, this note tends to be like right at the top of your tessitura, right? You can go high if you want. You can go higher if you want, but it's sort of like the natural break between head voice and falsetto, right? So pieces in F major tend to be flat because of the fact that when the tenor is on that particular note, it's an awkward note for them to sing, right? And so just... It also depends on how frequently you sing in certain pieces of music. If you sing in certain keys all the time, your voice is going to become more acclimated to hitting those pitches accurately. Whereas if you suddenly change tuning systems to like 432 or something, or if you're singing in a key that you don't sing super often in, your voice it might be harder for you to achieve perfect intonation. But I'm not an expert on that by any means, so I would definitely that's something to ask like a choir director. So what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swell? There's a test of intelligence right there. Hello. Any tips on writing transitional material between... Transitional material, that's hard. I like to come up with music, not that's just a bunch of individual things that I then sort of like... It's like, oh, here's a 1900. It's like not like I'm making a tapestry and I'm like, okay, here's 1900, here's 1950, and then I'm going to sort of seam them together. I personally don't like to thinking about that because to me the seam always seems contrived, no matter how good you are. I like to write music that necessitates what comes after it. I write this thing, and this thing makes you want this thing, and then that thing seems to lead to this thing. It's just so it comes across as so stream of consciousness, almost impressionistic, that nothing is transition. Everything is material. This leads to that, which leads to this, which leads to that, and you can't pick and pinpoint as any individual parts being transitional. Now, you're writing for a film, you start having to involve actual transitions because you have this and you need to get to this. But still, I always try to compose it as if there is not it's not like, oh, suspended symbol, or, oh, I need to get from A flat major to F major. Let's go A flat. Okay, we got the C in common with C dominant 7. I'll hold that over C dominant 7, F major, right? Because that's something that you would have never written that artistically or emotionally unless you knew you had to get to F major. I just don't like things that aren't done for musical or artistic reasons. So that's just my personal subjective opinion on that thing. There's gonna be all kinds of fun stuff. Siegfried, Karg. Oh, that's a cool name. I will write that down. What do you think about Radivara's percussion concerto incantations? I've been trying to spend my time writing and complete. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love Radivara's sense of tonality. Even when he uses like simple triadic harmonies with sort of like parsimonious voice slitting, like the beginning of the first like 2 minutes of his 7th symphony, the first movement of his 7th symphony is just absolutely wonderful. He's a very mystical composer too, very similar to Messiaen in that he was quite fascinated with bird sounds and things. Listened to some of Glinka's. I actually have listened to some of Glinka's operas. Life from the Start, haven't heard that one. Yeah, I'll check that out. He's one of the first Russian composers. Do you write directly from your head to paper, or do you need to use the piano software to get your ideas through? What is your composing process? It depends. If I'm just writing down melodies or ideas, I often will just sort of hum them in my phone or write them down on paper. I don't necessarily need to. But at the same time, if I'm writing for balance, I've tested myself. I've done funny tests for myself where I've sort of turned down all the knobs and not listened to any audio and see if I can compose something that sounds good. And it's turned out fairly well. But as long as you exercise your ear as much as you possibly can, there's no problem with relying, or I shouldn't say relying, but, sort of reinforcing what you've composed with playback. Especially if you're writing for samples, then it's not like you've got an extra process to go for live orchestra. What you're writing is what's going to come off, so it's very important that you use your ears and write. Whereas if you're writing something that's like, if something doesn't necessarily sound good with note performer, if you're familiar enough and listen to enough live orchestral music, you know whether or not note performer is being inaccurate or whether or not you can trust it. But in terms of balance, note performer is pretty good. What are the steps to having your scores published by Hallionard? That's not something. I've only self-published some of my music on like Music and AO. I'm not that concert world of publishing music. It's just I'm completely unfamiliar with that because it's not my intended career path. Why do percussion parts and stability not respond to my MIDI keyboard? Yeah, they're not laid out like they typically are in MIDI because of the fact that orchestral percussion is a different beast from sort of like drum set percussion that traditional MIDI does. So if you're using a particular like ARIA player VST, I've never worried about whether or not percussion parts sound correct in my scores. I just sort of like write it as it is, and then once I'm done and I sort of publish or complete and edit the score, I will then go and sort of slightly adjust the score so that things play back correctly regardless of what the right note is on the score. So I usually have two different versions of the score, one for playback and one for the score. And so I can't answer your question, so I'm sorry. But you might be able to find an answer to the question on our forum. My voice is starting to die. Piano, it plays. I've tried to appreciate atonality in modern jazz, but cannot. I try to learn from it, but I end up relying on classical. That's totally cool. No, if you don't like atonality in jazz and you just can't get yourself to like it, you don't have to force yourself to like something. Everybody has their own unique aesthetic sensibilities. I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of, like I never tried to make myself like jazz or even like atonality. Like there's some atonality, but I don't like. But like Samuel Barber's Piano Sonata has lots of atonal stuff in it, but I just love it because it's so motivically interesting and it makes me feel something. If something doesn't make you feel something, especially like atonality, then I don't think there's anything wrong with. I don't think it's closed-minded. If you've genuinely tried to get into it and you just can't, there's nothing wrong with not getting into it. Yeah, I love Penderecki. Final Fantasy melodies quality. Oh, Final Fantasy is wonderful. I love Nobuo Uematsu. He's also very creative harmonically too. Perhaps a bit more than Kondo, although I would say Kondo is the better melodist, but that's subjective. Can we send requests and send a scores review? Maybe if you that would be a fun video series to just sort of kind of like Adam Neely is doing how to not suck at music. You could send your score and I could just give you my subjective feedback on it. Just pull it up. That would actually be really easy for me to do. It wouldn't be that hard. I will think about that. How about this? Go ahead and send me an email, and in all caps, put in the subject line, score review, and send me a Sibelius file, if possible, or if not, a PDF and an MP3 or an XML file would be best. And I'll see if I can do a video series in the future, because I don't see anything against that. In fact, that'd be a good thing to do until I can sort of devote more time to editing, because that'd be pretty easy to do. Oh, yeah, somebody already said that. That's funny. What do you think of Yoshimatsu? Oh, I love Yoshimatsu. I freaking love Yoshimatsu. Especially the piano concerto. Oh, that thing makes me cry. Matching tempo to fixed picture, yeah. I would love to do that. That would be a difficult video to make. It would be something I have to prepare for a lot, but that's a video that I'm planning on doing. How to write music to picture, especially hitting a bunch of sync points to action, because that's a whole process and involves quite a bit of math. John Murphy Swimming is an amazing example of night. Are you going to do some composing? I might. I'll try and schedule another live stream where I can get the, because I don't want you to have to deal with the audio. Well, I don't know. We'll try it and see a little bit. So here, people stop submitting questions so I can get through this without feeling guilty. What grad schools are conducive to VGM? It depends. I don't generally like just from what I've heard from people who've gone there and looking at the curriculum, I don't generally like schools that tends to have degrees focusing towards media composition, because they don't really focus on the composition just so much as like the production aspect of it. So that's why I wanted to go to more classically oriented school. So, tell me a lot about composing. I would love to be able to hear one of my research pieces. Yeah, go ahead and send it to me with the same thing. You know, yeah, the same subject line. Taught me literally all. That's wonderful. That makes me happy. Have you ever composed for a cappella groups? Yes, I have. I've composed music for my a cappella group. Both the Barbershop Quartet as well as the Pitch Hitters, and it went quite well. I'll have to. I could probably get a recording of some of these things. Will this live session be available on the channel? Yes. Yeah, I definitely might want to watch it slower. I need to remind myself to slow down. I want to make sure I get through all this stuff. Do you have any percussion ensemble writing tips? What I would say is just get this book. Where is it? This is a absolutely phenomenal book. How to Write for Percussion by Samuel Solomon, who was a principal percussionist for the New York Philharmonic. It has all kinds of audio files. It talks about notation, idiomaticism, tons of musical examples. It's just like, this is the golden book for learning how to write well for percussion. Has an employer ever wanted you to do something musically where you felt you had to really put your foot down because they were making a mistake from the perspective of your area? Yes, but it wasn't so much. It was just that I was fed up with it. It wasn't so much. I was doing a big band piece, and I really liked the big band piece. It's actually the piece, I think I posted it on my channel. The swing, hello. Yeah, I finally did. So anyway, but in that particular instance, the client that I was working for, we just had such huge creative differences, and I went through like 4 or 5 revisions trying to please him, and he just really wanted to micromanage everything. And he didn't even tell me like the story of the game. He didn't give me enough information, and so I just pulled the plug on that. But other than that, I kind of reiterate, what I said before about working with directors. How about transcription videos, and where do I send to? What do you mean by transcription videos? Yeah. Yeah. And look at any of my YouTube videos. Just look in the description, and you'll see my email. I'll just go ahead and put it here. Send it to that email. Thanks for answering this question. Yeah. Have you listened? I love the soundtrack from Gravity Rush. Also, check out Will Bedford. He has some great music. Check out his Grapple Seed theme, which is a lot like Gravity Rush. Gorgeous piece of music. And also check out his Sublevel Zero. He's a not super well-known composer, but he's a technical wizard, and he's written some really great music. Okay, we have reached the end. I'm not sure whether or not. Let me just do a little test here. Let's see how terrible. I probably actually should be able to. Hold on. Let me go to OBS. Let me turn on this, and let me put this. No, not that. No. This. All right, can everybody see both my face and Sibelius? That was a question. So, okay. Let me see how well this will play back. Okay. We'll go with. Okay. Well, first let me ask before we start this. What do you want me to write? Don't make it something too involved. Present some ideas. What do you want me to do? I am short. I'm like 5'6". And you're really tall. You're how tall are you, Dylan? Like 6'6"? Horn octet. Fugue. I don't know if I can write a fugue on it might be kind of fun actually to write a fugue. I could start a fugue. Eris type death scene. Ooh, these are some good suggestions. I could write a fugue and you all could vote on the melody. Funeral march. Something in the style of Danny Elfman, string quartet. A nice short piece of jazz piano. That's something that's hard to write away from a full-size piano, though. Monster in Paris-esque. A chaconne. Yeah, I can write a chaconne. It's a bit esoteric. Funeral march sounds like fun. Sierra chord progressions that still maintain clear structure. I kind of like the idea of a fugue, and people wanted me to do a video on fugue. So maybe I could do a fugue on an Irish jig from outer space. Oh my gosh, I'm totally doing that. An Irish jig from outer space. I'm totally doing that. What do we want my instrumentation to be? Choose my instrumentation. How about an Irish jig from outer space that is a fugue? So it'll be in 6/8, and the subject will be Irish jiggy, and as well as outer space, and it will turn into a fugue. Okay. And then tell me what you think my instrumentation should be. Well, I'll have 3 instruments. So pick 3 instruments, like an alto instrument, a bass instrument, and a soprano instrument. Come on, I need some suggestions. I don't want to do the same. I don't want to do flute, clarinet, and theremin. Treasure Planet. Piccolo, flute, tenor sax, oboe, viola, bassoon. I kind of like oboe, viola, bassoon. I kind of like that. Oboe, viola, bassoon. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Oboe, viola, bassoon. Oboe. I don't know how far I'm going to get into this because I'm going to get hungry at some point. Oboe, viola, and bassoon. We'll put the bassoon underneath the viola. We'll go with a fast 12/8. So dotted quarter equals. What is that? I feel like that's pretty fast. Come on, metronome mark. No, what are you doing? What's going on? Boop. Quarter. Dot. There we go. We'll try 160. We'll leave this at atonal. It's been a little laggy. Hopefully it'll be better when I get in there. Irish jig. We'll go with jig. From outer space. Can't believe this. That is too good. That's so funny. All right. Okay. Here comes the test. After this bubble goes away. So can you still see the? Because I have a feeling it's ooh. I think I have to select a new window. Hold on. What's that one? That one's that one. Okay, hold on. Wait. Remove. Add. Window capture. Create new. Window. Sibelius Untitled. Boop. I wonder if I make this bigger. Oh yeah. Look at that. That's kind of nice actually. So let me, okay, give me a second to adjust this. This software and stuff is all new to me. So let me do something like this, and then let me go to OBS and make it a bit smaller so you can see what's going on. Ooh, ooh, boop, boop, boop. Yeah, okay. And then let me put this on top of it. Okay, that'll look good to you all. All right, let's see. Guys, we can donate to his Patreon so we can order pizza. A pizza actually sounds great. Can you mix orchestral instruments with sense for the space part, some percussion instrument, maybe tambourine? Yeah, we can do that. Looks clear. I'm already picking my suggestions. It's going to sound amazing. I don't know whether or not it's going to sound amazing. It might be a trash. It might be something to throw in the trash, but it'll be. I'll print it out and post it on my wall as a legacy. Okay. Sibelius, preferences, input devices, Q25. So the Q25 is hooked up. Oh. So how utterly atrocious is that? Can you hear that? Is that okay? Is that can you hear it at all? Is it completely terrible? That's coming from my Mac Mini into the thing. I think a fugue is probably a good. It's pretty bad, yeah. That's what I told you. I might have to do it. I'm too loud, or the oboe is too loud. All right. Well, let me try. But my voice is not too loud. But the oboe is too loud. So let me see. If I plug this into this. Let me see if I plug this into this. And I put this way over here. Like over here. Oh, the oboe is perfect? But wait, has my voice been too loud the whole time? Or did it just suddenly get loud? I didn't change any of the settings, so I'm not sure why that happened. The gain is all the way down on my microphone. Look! I'm telling you, the gain is all the way down on my microphone. I don't know why. Let me, perhaps... That's really weird. That's odd. Let me go to OBS. Mic auxiliary. Boop. Properties. Advanced audio properties. Audio input capture. Maybe I should just move the microphone really far away. Maybe the gain's messed up on this audio. When you started the stream, your mic got really quiet at some point. Okay. Well, it's a little better. I can't adjust the... That's too quiet for me, though. Oh, this is so frustrating. Let's see. Let me back this up. Let me back this microphone up to like way over here. How is that? Is that any better or no? I might just have to do a separate stream where I actually get this working properly. That sounds good? Okay, let's try that. I'm hoping because of the fact that it's a fugue, the important thing is hearing the notes. As you know, if I was writing something like texturally and orchestral, you'd really have to get like good audio. Okay, sweet. I'll try to check this periodically to make sure that things don't get too out of hand. Boo 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 boo. Dylan Fillmore is my friend in real life, in case you couldn't figure that out. Okay. All right. So we need a fugue subject. So we need something, maybe something that is invertible or not? Yeah, something that is invertible and something that is that can work with itself in canon. The the, you know, major with the upper tetrachord of minor scale. This is the typical, like, Star Wars. So maybe we'll do that. We do, like, sort of like D major. I'm feeling D major. D major with the upper tetrachord of minor, and then we go to some sort of, you know, 2, Lydian, flat 2, going back to D major. I don't really like, it's a bit cliche. That sounds a little bit Egyptian. This is gonna be tough. No, that's too. Let me pull you guys up and I'll play some different things and you can decide what you like. Let me put this over to the side. Why does the chat go away? If I make this window smaller, that's the first thing to go away is the chat. That doesn't make any sense, YouTube. Okay. Yeah, I kind of like that. Going from D major to F sharp major. I don't use Lydian because I always use Lydian. I kind of like that. I don't know. No. That's kind of nice. Because when you have the modality, it doesn't make it sound Middle Eastern. Yeah. We get some Irish. The turns, what do they call it? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Could be. So, yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. And yeah, and this will pivot right into the next. Okay, so in case you didn't, I'm sure you guys know mostly about fugues. You've got 3 parts of a fugue, right? You've got your exposition, you've got your development, which consists of episodes or statements of the fugue, and then you have your final statement, which leads into some sort of coda or cadetta. But basically, what you're just trying to do is you're trying to present a subject or a piece of thematic material, and it is going to be delineated in all 3 voices. And when you enter a new voice, it's usually traditionally like a 5th above. You go to the dominant and then back to the home key, and then back to the dominant, or sometimes the subdominant. But we can have any sort of key relationship that we want in a modern fugue. And we can also think about, okay, how closely do we want to adhere to like 18th century rules? I kind of want to give a break here. You know what I mean? So, oh no. Alright, okay. For now, what do you guys think about... Let me read all this. You You can pop the chat in a separate window. Yeah, I know, but it's the chat. I can't make the chat small because it cuts it off on the right. YouTube is being stupid. What makes the Slime Rancher ranch theme so addictive? Please help. Something to us making it sound like Egyptian. Yeah, it's the okay when you have the going from D major to E flat major to C minor. It's the implication of that stretched out F sharp and E flat. It's interesting because spacey music and Egyptian music both has an alien sort of quality to it. They're very similar. They use a lot of the similar tonal techniques, but you have to avoid that particular cliche in order to avoid it sounding Egyptian. More nonsense about the emotion. Yeah, okay, alright. Is everybody cool with that? Any suggestions to change that, or do you like it? Should we go with it for now? I'm gonna assume so. Okay, alright, okay. We'll go with it. Right, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, especially when you get into Arabic music. They have all kinds of scales, and it's a lot more complicated than that. Okay. Me like it. Yeah, so let's go up in tertiary relationships. So this will basically translate into a sort of like D flat major. Excuse me. Going from D flat major to F major, so we'll inharmonically respell it. Right? Because what I'm thinking of, if we take this and we transpose it to F major, this F sharp will become an A, and the A will work with a nice imperfect consonance with the C. So boop. I can also just play it in. What am I doing? Oh yeah.
Quick, JJ, what's the pitch range of a snare drum?
I have no... Oh my gosh. I'm doing a live stream. Bye-bye. That's funny. Hey! So, well, there actually is a pitch range to a snare drum. But that's a story for another time. In fact, some jazz drummers actually... Well, I won't get into that. Distracting. Is that the same tertiary? Yeah, it is. I'm second guessing my transposition skills. Okay. And also my ability to read alto clef. Okay, so you're gonna have to be careful with that. They're minor third, right? So they're gonna be just for ease of. I'm gonna play a wimpy way out and just turn this into a treble clef. So when we're writing counterpoint, we want to try to get independence, right? And then it's interesting, when I'm writing for oboe and viola, their timbres are so different that I might not even be averse to if I was to do something like if I was to do something like something like that, this voice crossing would normally not be acceptable in like a piano fugue or an organ fugue, but because the timbres are so different from each other, you might still be able to perceive the difference. So we might go with that for now. This needs to be slower. I kind of want to simplify this. Usually what I start is sort of the most complex counterpoint, and then I simplify things down so it doesn't sound really contrived. If that makes sense. Shame on me. Yeah, the string will be along these pizzicato chords. Okay, so I kind of like this. This keeps it separate. It's just a voice exchange, right? We've got this here, pops up by octave to imperfect consonants, right? We do have an octave here, which is left by an imperfect consonants, splits out
to a major third. Yeah, again, we're liable to simplify this as we go down the line. Third, fifth, contracting in contrary motion to a third, dissonance, which is resolved to a sixth. This note goes where it wants to here. I'm okay with these leaps because of the style. You know, like even though there's it's sort of a pentatonic-y type thing. So let's see what that sounds like. We'll have to give them some break. The reason I'm making this such a long line for the oboe is because the oboe can handle it. They can have they have a tremendous amount of tone they can produce before needing to breathe because the reed is so small. Da 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 ba 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 da 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 da. Yeah, so da 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 ya da dum. And we'll go back here. We'll back off for a second and then go right, and then boop, and then here, right? You know what I mean? So right, and then when we get to mezzo forte, they'll sort of be at the same dynamic level. Boop boop boop. All right. I probably should have copied and pasted the same. Oh wow. Did I make them separate? I feel like I did. Yeah. People tend to not write enough slur breaks for woodwinds, by the way. Just sort of random comment. They'll sort of make it just sort of non-stop. But actually, if you write like bowing for a string section and then you copy and paste it onto the woodwinds, believe it or not, the bowing that you write for the string section actually tends to work out quite nicely in conjunction with the woodwinds. Sometimes you might want a languid line, but to allow them to tongue the notes, you know, two, 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 two is a lot better than that. It tends to sort of lose a bit of emphasis and articulation if it's all under one slur, if that makes sense. I need to remember to keep checking in. Compelling rhythms, organ view. Okay. All right. Let's hear what this sounds like. It's a little bit too. Yeah. It's a bit too quick for me. I kind of like that. I want to simplify this so we can hear this entrance. I kind of just want to leave it like this. You know what I mean? Right, and then we do eliminate the voice crossing. Again, simplification is not. It's always a good thing to try out. Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Third, sixth. Again, I might simplify. That's too high. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if I want to tie this or leave it. That'll be okay. You want to be you la da 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 or do la da da da. What do you think? Tie or slur? Vote. Tie or slur? Do la da da da. That's tie. Boo la da da da. That's slur. I need a vote. Slur. Slur. I agree. I agree. Good choice. Still a hair too fast. That was nice. I kind of want to move this whole thing down though, because it's a little bit too high for. I mean, the oboist can play it, but it's a little bit thin up there. So I kind of want to move it down to like maybe. F major. Maybe just move the whole thing down by a third. Let's try that. Transpose by interval down major third. Boop. Right, and then it's still sharp. Nice. Let's try that out. I don't know. I kind of like the. We'll leave it. We'll leave it. We'll leave it. We'll just make sure to not go any higher for the. It is because it does sound kind of like quirky when it's up that high. Am I literally? Why does Sibelius do this? Why does it save your movements from one note to another? That's not something that you would want to have to undo. It's such a pain in the. Anyway. Do we need a transition, a bridge to get into the bridge can happen in the exposition. Usually, once you've entered your first two voices, it gives you a modulatory structure that leads you into a position where your third voice is going to be able to enter in advantageously. So, we'll think about whether sometimes they don't have bridges, but sometimes they do. Whatever sounds best. We're from D major to F major down to. D major up to F major. So next is A flat, which is actually quite. That's a nice. Nice high up in the register. I'm just gonna take this and put it down an octave. I mean, transpose it because I'm a lazy bum. We are in D major. We are going up to A flat, so that means tritone. Diminished fifth. It's probably gonna inharmonically screw it. Yeah. Enter button inharmonically respells. Do you want it to enter in this octave, or do you want it to be up here? This is a bit higher, a bit tenery, or we could have a nice sort of like, and we can make it all staccato. We'll do another vote. Do you want the higher one or the lower one? That's funny. I'll definitely do that. If there's a tie between slow, that's funny. That's hilarious. Low. Okay, we got one vote for low. We got one vote for higher one. Tiebreaker, tiebreaker, tiebreaker. Lower. Okay. Yeah. I like lower. I think it'll make it again quirky and. I'm gonna change the articulate. You know. I think I'm gonna bring this up just to give it a boom. I think I'm just going to leave it at forte, just so it'll be heard. Let's hear that. Ba, ba, ba. Okay, I like that. The articulation could use a little work. I don't know. I kind of like it. Listen one more time. I think I want to do ba 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 bum ba ba bum. Yeah, make this ba ba bum ba bum. Ba 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 bum ba bum bum ba bum bum. This will give the bassoonist a workout, most definitely. All right. It actually works. That's funny. This F sharp works as a sixth with this up here. That was a nice happy coincidence. Bum 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 bum. Look at a little bum bum bum. I kind of want to do like yadam bum bum ba diddle diddle diddle. You know what I mean? Like bum 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 dum boom, boom. You know what I mean? Right? This 4/3 suspension, fifth, resolves down to sixth. So it's invertible counterpoint, right? Because when you have invertible counterpoint, fifths invert to fourths, so you need to make sure that you resolve fifths just like you would fourths. Bum, 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 bum. I kind of like that. If it was a real player, I'd give them portamento. Right? This will give us some different character. Too bad no performer won't play that bright. I see. Yeah, we'll do that. Oops, sorry. We'll leave them in the mezzo forte. We don't even need to write mezzo forte, it's implied. And we'll bring leave it like that. Again, this third, sixth, right? So it all works out nicely. Whenever you have a repeated note, see if you can get a different interval on top, right? So you're not just repeating the same interval over and over again. So give them some breaks. I'm gonna have to eat soon. I'll have to finish this next time. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes what I like to do is give first species counterpoint to two voices, so same rhythms but independence and interval, and then have this upper voice do something just totally different. So two of them sort of band together for a little bit. So again, you can check these intervals here. Right, all parallel and perfect consonants with the exception of the voice exchange. And in the interest of line, you know? So we need to change this. What is it? We're back to C major. Here's an example of where breaking the rules is totally cool. I want this, you know, to be reiterated for effect. So that's a nice sense of melodic repetition, right? But we do get a fourth, right? Which is basically just, it's sort of an inverted horn fifths thing, you know what I mean? Like this, just inverted, you know, so you do get the, up an octave, so you get the fourth. So this fourth isn't resolved, but because it's a fourth, and fourths are okay today, right? And we have an octave, which goes separate to a fifth. Because this fifth immediately resolves up to a nice sixth, and right, and then we have, and then this makes a nice, because in the end it just sort of works out contrapuntally so nicely, and we're not creating any dissonances necessarily. We just have a few intervals in a row that are cold intervals, and we have a fourth that's not resolved properly. In order to keep this consistent with this, and because of the fact that it still is going to sound fine vertically, I'm going to, you know, break the 18th century rules in this particular case. Let's see. This is low. Shall we go contrapursuing to give it more punch? Yeah, perhaps. But I like the tenor, upper tenor register. Yeah, exactly. It's perfect for bassoon in this range. Composer, that's funny. Needs percussion. Regular bassoon, the most high range of screen. Yeah, that's a really high range though, and the right is spring. Insert Bob Ross. That's funny. Bob Ross. Probably had percussion after he gets notes on the lick. Oh my god. Alright, so that all works nicely contrapuntally. Hopefully I'm explaining it enough. I kind of like that. Alright, I'll finish this line and then I have to go eat dinner. Unfortunately, I'll leave this as an exposition, and maybe for you all to finish it, or maybe I'll, you know, finish it on another stream or something, or just finish it off camera. And I don't know if I'm gonna post this. This is absurd, but quite fun. I hope you all are enjoying this. Okay, so let's think about this. So are we gonna fill in the missing note, you know, or are we gonna double something, right? Yeah. So that's the missing note, right? A flat. There's a nice A sus chord. I kind of want this to just resolve down here. Bum 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 bum. And then we'll give it a bit of rest there. There's nothing wrong with rest. That's the question. Which one? That's kind of nice. It's a bit leapy, but again, you get this very like Irish stylistic, like As long as you kind of, as long as it sounds good melodically, you don't, the leap and come back by step is not really aesthetically something that happens a lot in Irish music. Be careful with that E there. So we got this. We've got the sixth there. That's a little out of. Parallel fifths. Ah, screw it. Yeah. This is interesting. We've got this, which works out with this, and so when we get this in here, it does work out, but this is sort of a neighboring tone, which doesn't necessarily function like this, but because of the fact that the C is not hitting that, it's going to totally sound fine because they're not hitting each other. So it's sort of a inserting harmonic on the sort of the really micro level, and it's excusable. It's like harmony within harmony, so to speak, if that makes sense. What samples are these? Oh, this is just no performer, yeah. Almost the beginning of the Close Encounters theme. Interesting. Do I have perfect pitch? No, I don't have perfect pitch. The upper line is close to the Close Encounters theme, or is it just the sample? Upper line is close to the encounters. Close to Close Encounters. Wait, hold on. What part of Close Encounters? I'm just curious. I can't think of a melody from Close Encounters. Close to Close Encounters. What part of the Close Encounters theme? I'm curious. Because I'm quite familiar with that score. We won't worry about it. It's the rubbish anyway. What fun. Alright. Let's see how this works. And then we need to go in the opposite direction. We got octave there, so we gotta fill it in with the imperfect constants. We'll save that for that, because where it's needed. Again, just get these notes out and then we'll fix them. Let's see, what do we got here? We got this F. Yadam, yadadam, yadam, yadadam. So that goes up. Yadadam, yadam, ooh. And I think we'll leave this at A flat to keep the spaciness since we're not introducing another voice. And then this will resolve now. We'll just give it a nice little cadence. Alright, now let's do a few corrections, and then I gotta go eat dinner, because I'm starving. I still feel like it's too fast. I don't know about you all. That's funny. I actually don't have any problems with that. I might completely absurd theme. Irish chick from outer space. Well, there you have it. There is some fun on the spot rubbish. I'm curious. Hold on, wait. Penultimate bar, top line. Oh, bum 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 boom bum. Is that what you're talking about? Top line. Penultimate bar. Penultimate bar. I slightly see the resemblance, maybe, but I mean that's such a simple theme. That's funny. I guess we were going for spacey, so Close Encounters mixed with Irish. When we upload the performance of your symphony very soon, it's of this aliens planet. Could you play just the oboe line? Yeah, I'll play the individual parts. Yeah, that's nice. This is still a bit awkward. I would probably fix that if I were to spend more time on this. The viola. And the repetition of that note, it wouldn't go to C major. It would go to something different. And of course, this, which is the theme. And the real test is if if you can hum it all. That's the whether or not you know. All right. Yeah, that's hard to sing right there. But this. Yeah, I might change this as well. I might just fix it to that because that does. It's an augmented interval, but it still works. Yeah, that sounds better. And of course, I go through and tweak all these little details. Anyway, hopefully that was enjoyable for you all. Just a little rubbish fugue exposition. So anyway, I'll take just one more question and then that'll be it. If anybody has any other questions, and then I gotta head out. Thank you all for joining me, by the way. I really appreciate that. Ding 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 ding. Going once. Going twice. 3 times. All right. It has been fun. Yeah, no, you could definitely support it harmonically. All right, okay. Do you require mental stamina for composing? To me, there's like creative stamina and there is mental stamina. Mental stamina is like your ability to calculate and understand all of these little slight motivic relationships in a very technical way, like writing counterpoint, for example. And then creative stamina is your ability to sort of come up with new ideas, whether it's harmony or... And so, like, there are very different things. Sometimes my brain is... I've had coffee and I'm just sort of like very much mental stamina, intellectuality type thing, but I don't feel very creative, right? And there are other times where I just feel like I've got all this music inside of me, but I don't have the mental stamina and willpower to sort of get it out on page. So for me, it's all about cultivating my life in such a way that I have mental stamina as well as creative stamina. Mental stamina is just all about getting enough sleep, eating healthy, drinking coffee, having plenty of water, getting plenty of exercise so your brain is always fresh and ready to go. And creative stamina is the things that I was talking about, listening to music, score studying, going away from music, emptying your mind, going for walks. And so to me, they're definitely two sort of like meters, and I'm always trying to sort of cultivate and tend to both of them. And when they both are in a really good spot, that's when you get a really, good. Dylan Fillmore asks, are you an extrovert? No, I am not an extrovert. Oh yeah, Ashton, good to see you here. I'm not an extrovert. I don't know. I'm a big subscriber to the whole MBTI personality system, which says that there are extroverted functions and there are introverted functions. So I'm an INTJ, which means I have introverted intuition, but extroverted thinking. So I won't go into it too much beyond that. But I definitely recharge on my own by myself, and I like socializing and going out, and I'm a very hyperactive individual and may come across like an extrovert, but I definitely am need recharge. I recharge not outside and out and about, but I recharge in my room, reading, composing, listening, that type of a thing. So again, thank you all for coming. Thanks for 10,000 subscribers. Hopefully we'll have another live stream soon. Hopefully I'll do some videos soon. I like the idea of like commenting on people's orchestral music, because that would be really easy for me to do. It wouldn't take a lot of preparation, and hopefully you all will get something out of it. So feel free to send that over to me. Send me an email with the all caps subject line. So yeah, adios. You guys have a wonderful evening.